There's never been a due respect to Hispanic organized crime. And the problem was finding Spanish-speaking investigators. That's how I was recruited in 2003 to join the Bureau, because of my language ability. Not until I got in did I realize how bad the Bureau is about having agents that speak Spanish.
That's crazy. It's like the biggest demographic.
That's exactly what I thought. MS-13 may get the flashy violence and butchering, but they're smart. They stay under the radar and conduct the criminal activity, so they're doing more damage to our community than does.
Every corporation has a bad office. There's
Right.
bad people. Then there's a lot of good people, and the problem is all it takes is a few bad people to pull down the reputations of everyone else, especially when people aren't there to see it. There are a lot of people at the FBI who do amazing work. The problem is that there are people that have been involved in some of these investigations, including on President Trump, and objectively, whether you like Trump or not, those cases were like, you're going through his wife's drawer. Like, are you kidding me? Hey guys, if you're not subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button on the video. And if you don't have time to watch this episode right now, no problem, but I'd really appreciate it if you would save it to your watch later playlist. Finally, if you'd like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below. Thank you. All right, so I hear there are gangs from Venezuela invading America. What the hell's going on here, bro?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a problem here in this country. So hopefully, one of my things I like to do is have conversations with guys like you and other individuals who have been on other podcasts, is because for such a long time, and I've been chasing these Hispanic gang members for 15 years of my 20-year career with the Bureau. Whoa. There's never been a due respect to Hispanic organized crime. The only one
respect.
That, let's put it this way, it is always considered second tier of like gang work and criminal work. The Hispanic organized crime elements in the gang units in the FBI, at the HSI, DEA, ATF. DEA, that's their focus. They focus on the cartels,
Sure.
But at the FBI, and like I said, I was doing this for 15 years in my 20-year career, that they look at a Hispanic kind of like Hispanic organized crime. Okay, MS-13, Tren de Aragua, Trinitarios. Well, all right, let's focus on the Bloods, the Crips, English speaking. It was always considered that would be primary.
What about the Mexican cartels? You didn't mention them. I don't know if that's the same.
Well, there was a group on. So I'm speaking from, like I said, FBI in Newark here in Jersey. So there's a squad there that works organized crime enforcement task force. So they go after cartels. That's their focus. But on the gang side, in the gang unit, which I was a part of for, like I said, most of my career, that gang unit and the problem was finding Spanish-speaking investigators. I speak Spanish fluently. It's my first language. I grew up in my home speaking Spanish. My mother's from Chile. My dad's from Argentina. Oh. So I grew up speaking Spanish.
Your last name's Brunner?
Yeah.
So where was your grandfather in or around 1941 or 42? God damn it.
So
found another one.
My father, he escaped Belgium. He was 9 years old at the time. He escaped Belgium after the Blitz. And he escaped to Argentina when he was 9 years old. So he's not going to be part. He's not going to be the group. Yeah,
he's clean. That's good.
They escaped to get out of war-torn Europe. And my father grew up in Argentina, and where he met my mom, and then they came to the United States in the 60s.
Okay.
So we grew up speaking Spanish in the home, my sister and I. And that's how I was recruited in 2003 to join the Bureau, because of my language ability.
And you told me you were coming from the Navy? Is that right?
I was in the Navy.
What'd you do in the Navy?
So you ever see that, like in the movies, the dark room and the big radar scopes?
Yeah.
Those guys are called operations specialists. So I was an enlisted guy. So I did that for 5 years while I was on sea duty on the USS Stark, USS McInerney. So we did radar tracking, communications. We were the brains of the operation of the ship, where we launched the missiles, we tracked the aircraft. We literally would tell the Maverick and the Gooses out there, hey, we need your aircraft to come over here. And then they would get into the fight.
Nice.
So we did that. And then I spent 3 years at the Naval Academy as an instructor.
Okay.
From 99 until 03 when I joined the Bureau.
And then they plucked you. Really, a lot of it had to do with your language ability, you're saying?
Well, yeah. So they came, it was post, and it was 2002, right after, and they came to the academy, and I had just finished my bachelor's degree because I had spent, so I went straight out of high school here in Connecticut. I went straight to college. I went to Syracuse U. And after a year and a half, Syracuse kind of said, I think you need to go, because I wasn't studying. I was just spending too much time. So I left Syracuse after a year and a half, and then joined the Navy, and that's where I finished my education, finished my degree. So I was 3 years at the Naval Academy. They were talking to me about trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was either going to re-enlist, already 9 years in, re-enlist, do my 20, or get out with my bachelor's degree and see what I could do. And it was post. And an FBI recruiter, special agent recruiter, came to the academy looking, and I was in a room full of Navy commanders, captains, Navy SEALs, pilots, and I was one enlisted guy in the room. And the recruiter was like, well, we need, and traditionally everybody thinks about the FBI as lawyers and CPAs and, people who are multiple degrees educated. And I wasn't any of those. And I was an enlisted guy.
You are a bulldog.
I was nothing. So I looked at it and I said, and they were going through, hey, these are the things we're looking for: computer scientists, language, people who can speak Mandarin, Farsi, Urdu, and then Spanish. And I was like,
interesting.
You really need people that speak Spanish. Not until I got in did I realize how bad the Bureau is about having agents that speak Spanish.
That's crazy. It's like the biggest demographic here.
That's exactly what I thought. So I literally, what they said, we're looking for people to speak Spanish. I was like, all right, I'll apply. But, at every step, I was like, okay, here's phase 1 exam. That was September 11th, 2002. I took the phase 1 exam. And then every step of the way, they just said, okay, here, show up for this, show up for this, show up for this, show up for this. And then September 7th, 2003, I reported to the academy for new agent training.
In Quantico?
In Quantico. And then 17 weeks completed that. And my first office was Newark. Never left.
And were you put on a desk dealing with these gangs right away, or did you start with something else?
And that's exactly why the Bureau is, backwards when it thinks about that. I am a fluent Spanish speaker, was considered a level 3 Spanish speaker, which is more than, typical. And I was put on a counter. Which is, I said, okay, listen, the Bureau needs. And I say I was going to go with the Bureau needs, and they put me on a CT unit.
Well, did they have you looking at them trying to bring in guys through the border in Mexico or something?
No, I was working. So it was just, hey, we need, So they didn't, they didn't look at it. I mean, and again, I wasn't part of the decision making. They just said we need a person here, but they didn't look at it. Okay, let's put this guy on, the gang unit because we need a Spanish speaker over there. Let's put it. For me, it wasn't, what I was utilized for. So I had to cut my teeth and earn my way. And then finally, once I had earned enough time, I was able to say, I'd like to go over there. I want to work. I want to speak Spanish. I want to use this for my ability. And I was transferred over finally to the gang unit in 2012.
So, because you made this distinction a few minutes ago about cartels and then gangs from South America. But maybe this is way too much of a simplified way of me looking at it. But obviously the cartels are pumping the most and the most organized at that level, and they're like the suppliers, if you will.
Yep.
But the way I've always thought of it is a lot of these gangs, they're making their businesses where part of their business is also doing the same thing, even if it's getting supplied by those very same people.
Yes.
So why were they even separated? Like, I would think that would all be under, not to say like every investigator is working on all of them together, but I would think that would be under the same umbrella, but it sounds like it wasn't.
No, so in Newark, and I think in most divisions, in New York, FBI Newark, they all have the same construction where there's one group, which is the organized crime, OCDF, Organized Crime Enforcement Task Force. They go after cartels, they go after the large scale dealers. I mean, getting 1 kilo of coke is, small potatoes compared to what they really want to get. They want to get 5-10 kilos here. 5-10 kilos down in Texas, that's small potatoes to them. Down in Texas, I talked to FBI agents down there, like, 5 kilos is, that's lightweight compared to what we normally try and get.
Yeah, Texas A&M's a good time. Yeah.
Right. So, the other squad is the gang unit, and they're going after Bloods, Crips, and that's where it is also has the MS-13, the Trinitarios. What is amazing to me is, I chased MS-13 most of my career, but what I found here in New York, New Jersey, you don't see these. You see the Trinitarios, which is a Dominican gang. You see them in Florida and New York, New Jersey. They're huge here. It's originating out of the city. Is that they are much worse to this country than MS-13 by far.
All right, on what basis?
Here's why.
Interesting.
MS-13 may get the flashy violence and butchering, but Trinitarios they're smart. They stay under the radar and conduct the criminal activity, sell drugs, do the scams, do the grandma scam. They're scamming people out of thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. So they're doing more damage to our community by doing all these things than MS-13 does. MS-13 is not organized to have a structured, okay, we're going to do, organized scams and grandma scam. So for me, Trinitarios are much more dangerous. Financially.
But barbarically, what would you still say the same thing?
Barbarically, yes. MS-13 is no. Right. Yeah, because the Trinis don't do that. I mean, they're your traditional gang but they're transnational because they get a lot of their communications from the DR.
I don't want to de-emphasize those types of crimes and stuff because that's horrible, and obviously, it sounds like they were unfortunately really good at it. But don't communities get way more up in arms when they see 3 decapitated heads in the neighborhood versus 3 grandmas that got scammed?
Of course. But why? Because it's in the media. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
If it bleeds, it leads. I mean, how many tens of thousands of dollars are getting stolen and how many drugs are being sold to our kids, and those kids are going ODing or things like that, and that never gets any publicity. Yeah. So people get up in arms based upon what is put in front of them by the media. Yes, 3 decapitated. The quadruple homicide in Long Island, that was horrible. Absolutely. And there are other incidents of, in D.C. and in Boston of homicides. Yes, absolutely. Each one of those are equally horrible, but those get media coverage.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of the crimes that people don't even know about because a lot of these elderly people are getting scammed out of $10, $20, $40, $50,000 and they're never even reporting it.
What's let's start with the Trinitarios. Mm-hmm. What's their organization structure? We think about the Italian mob, people could say, well, they got a family, they got a boss, they got an underboss, a consigliere, some capos, whatever. How do they work here in the U.S. and how much of that power structure reports directly back to country of origin as well?
Well, the country of origin is the DR.
Yep.
And I spent, maybe a year really, investigating them. So we really didn't get into the nitty gritty, dirty, get my hands dirty on them. So that would be a little bit difficult. I know that they have a lot of command and control structure and communications with the DR. They get a lot of the scams come out of the DR. They'll make the calls. And then once they have a hook here in New Jersey, they'll call New York. And then New York will task somebody in New Jersey. So there is a triangle communication.
Got it.
So the Trinis here in New York City, they're the big dogs. New Jersey is a close second.
Damn it. We're behind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're the redheaded stepchildren of everything in Jersey.
Don't do that.
I love it.
Don't do that.
I love being the redheaded stepchild.
Just because you don't live here anymore doesn't mean you can make fun of us. We're the alphas here.
There's 3 things I miss out of Jersey. The food is the pizza and bagels and Dunkin' Donuts, D&D.
Right now, the U.S. is helping fund wars in Ukraine as well as Israel, and God knows what other places where war may or may not break out sometime soon. What these wars have required is for us to print money, which, creates more debt and leads to the devaluation of the United States dollar. Is your bank account prepared to fight back against inflation? Well, not to worry. That's why today's sponsor, Lear Capital, is here to help. Lear Capital specializes in helping people like me and you protect and grow our wealth with gold. In my old career, when I worked on Wall Street, the smart guys in the office always talked about having a portfolio allocation to gold and precious metals. They viewed it as a timeless protection against the other assets that are more risky. And living through the market fluctuations I did, I see exactly what they mean. When it comes to buying precious metals, you need the right company in your corner. That's why I trust Lear Capital. Now it's time to take action and get educated on alternative investment investments like gold and silver. Call Lear today at 855-271-1871 or go to trylear.com/Julian Dorey. That link is in the description below to get your free gold and silver wealth protection kit. There's no obligation either, just free information on protecting your hard-earned dollars with gold and silver. Once again, that phone number is going to be 855-271-1871, or you can go to trylear.com/Julian Dorey, which is the link in the description below. Finally, as a special offer, if you make a qualified purchase, Lear Capital will give you up to $15,000 in bonus coins. So one last time, call 855-271-1871. You don't have Dunkin' Donuts in Montana?
No Dunkin' Donuts.
That's a crime.
It's absolutely a crime. I've been talking to them, trying to find out how to franchise and open some D&D up in Bozeman. But
they don't have a big Indian population there? So where's the Dunkin' Donuts then?
Wrong Indian population. Wrong Indian.
No, I'm talking about the Indian, like the actual Indian population, not the Native American population.
That's what I'm saying. No,
we call them the wrong thing.
Nothing.
That's not
what
they're called.
There's two communities up there. Huge Hispanic community.
Yeah.
Huge Hispanic community because, and this goes back to what I was talking about, Sinaloa Cartel, CJNG, and Tren de Aragua, TDA, they're blossoming up in Montana.
In Montana?
In Montana.
Have you come across them?
Construction.
Yeah?
Yes.
Do you tell them what's up?
No. I stay away from them. But I've seen them, and because I know what to look for. I know how like certain vehicles and how they drive around town. So, but here's the thing is I know how to spot them. The problem in Montana is this. There's so much construction going on that a lot of the migrants over the last 4 years, those 15, 16 million people that came across the border, a lot of them went up to Montana for the construction. And when you get a gang like Trini's, MS-13, or Tren de Aragua, TDA, they'll go where there's communities. And there's 3 communities up in Montana. You have you have Hondurans, Venezuelans, and Mexicans. Those are the 3 big Hispanic communities. And there's a huge Hispanic community up in Montana because of the construction. So comes up behind them is TDA. CJNG and Sinaloa are there because, hey, listen, there's profit to be made. And it's the northern border. So I have a feeling that there's a lot of product coming down from Canada.
Yes. I had Kat Schultz here. She was talking about that. She's been to some of their places in Canada.
Yeah. And the fact of Justin Trudeau saying, well, less than 1%, listen, that's what you think. Okay, that's what you think because that's what was caught. I think there's a lot more coming across the border. And now with such a strong front at the southern border, I think a lot of them are going to shift. Listen, crime is like a river. It's going to flow no matter what. Even if it's you put up a wall, that river's going to go in other directions. And it's going through Canada right now. And CJNG and Sinaloa are up there. And the problem is this. And I've been working with people and talking to them and saying, listen, there's 3 things that you need to properly investigate and to dismantle a criminal organization, Hispanic criminal organization. And yes, I'm all for the ICE raids, but that's not taking care of the problem. You're just taking care of certain individuals. To get into the root of an organization, you need 3 things. A Hispanic organization is 1, you need a Spanish-speaking investigator. You can't have 2 and 3 without number 1. Number 1 has to be a Spanish-speaking investigator. You're never going to flip a source. You're never going to talk to somebody from the community, and you're never going to have someone trust you to say, an informant, and say, okay, without being able to speak their language. It's never going to happen. And on top of it, sitting across from somebody you've just arrested, you're never going to get them to flip when you're talking through a translator. Not going to happen. Right. I've had it. I've done it. It never works.
Yeah.
So number 1. Number 2, you got to have an investigator who knows the crew, knows how they work, their structure. You don't need to know everything about them, but you need to know, hey, in MS-13, it's called a click. You have the first word, the second word, and how it's built. You have a program manager that's down in Mexico, the East Coast program.
Program manager. That's like official.
Correct. So they have a program manager who deals with, so for example, New Jersey falls under the East Coast program. I don't know what it is now, but I knew that during my time from 2015 to 2023, it was called the East, and before 15, but it was called, New Jersey fell under the East Coast program. New Jersey, Massachusetts, North Carolina, they all fell under a command structure.
They keep this in like an Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Come on.
No, it's all very structured. MS-13... As crazy as a street gang as they were very detailed and keeping things. And you did not do something without asking for permission. And you had to, if you wanted to commit a homicide, you had to ask permission. You had to go up the chain of command. So you have to have somebody who understands how to to work an investigation. And working important here is a RICO, a racketeering case.
Yes.
They have to know how to put together a RICO case.
How do you do that from the bottom up? Because we always hear this thrown around. Obviously, we know it's Ben and G. Robert Blakey to go after the Italian mob, and it can get to the boss or whatever. But if you're starting day one and you're like, we're not going to get to the top guy, the only way we can do this is RICO, where do you start?
You find a loose thread. Find a loose thread and you start pulling on it. So you find the crime. So, and I'll use an example of a RICO case we did here in New Jersey. I think it was 2015. In June of 2015, there was a homicide right up the street here in Union City.
Oh, no.
It was a young man who was shot in the head. And we had an individual who provided us information about this, and we started looking into it. So it literally is starting to pick apart at the investigation, looking at the entirety of it. And, whether it be the homicide. Now, RICO is, for those who may not know, you have to prove that you've committed a crime for the good of the organization.
Right.
The good of the organization. And you have to show 2 predicate acts. So in other words, you have to have committed 2 different acts for the good of the organization, not just for the good of you. If you're walking down the street and you randomly shoot somebody because you wanted their Walkman, that's not for the good of the group. But if that shooting was to get yourself a tattoo, that's for the good of the group, because you're showing your strength of MS-13 or TDA. So that could be a racketeering act. So you have to show proof, and it literally is finding someone who's willing to talk and then flip, and that's just interviews and talking and working with the U.S. Attorney's Office and getting the information together. So in 2015 was a homicide. We did not do a superseding indictment until 2018.
Well, it takes a long time to build this stuff,
It takes
right?
a long time to gather evidence, because the U.S. Attorney's Office is different from states and locals. I love the states and locals. I love working with them. But from the U.S. Attorney's side is they're not going to indict until they have a rock solid case. And they're saying, hey, we've got enough to go to trial right now, this day, when we're going to indict.
So we can win.
So we can win. And we're not going to go indict until we have every T crossed, every I dotted. And that's, I worked with some great people at the U.S. Attorney's Office here in DNJ in New Jersey. So it's making sure everything is done right. All the evidence is logged, is boom, 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 boom. And that's why I think the percentage is like 89% of federal cases never see a day in court. Because when it's presented to the defendants, they're like, ooh, it's pretty overwhelming. And they'll take a plea.
Right.
They'll take a plea.
Yeah, it's like 97, 98% conviction rate.
Right.
Which I have some mixed feelings on some of that, but yeah.
But a lot of these guys, so in racketeering, if you commit murder in the aid of racketeering, there's only one sentence. It's mandatory life. Mandatory life. If you're convicted in court, in trial. So a lot of plea deals for people that are facing, murder RICO is 25, 30 years. So they're looking at, they're like, well, screw it. Let me go to trial. So, and then they end up losing. So we did a trial in 2016 for Plainfield, New Jersey. We took 8 individuals of MS-13 in Plainfield to court. All of them were convicted.
Of murder.
I believe 5 out of the 8 were part of murder. So the 5 out of the 8 got mandatory life. In 2021, I went on Union City, MS-13, and 3 of them went to trial. All 3 were convicted. So they're awaiting sentencing, I believe, right now, even for a 2021 trial. It just takes, because of COVID, it just backed up everything. Yeah. So they're sitting in jail. They were convicted though. So it takes time. So you need to have an agent who understands how to do RICO and how to put together the 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Yeah. And the last piece is, you have to have these 3. The last piece is the Department of Justice. The U.S. Attorney's Office you have to have a USA that's willing to put in the time to saying, hey, I'll be in this for the next 2 to 3 years. And if I'm not here, the office is supporting this, the U.S. Attorney. The problem here is one of the problems with the way life is now, and I had this problem at the Bureau, and as far as the DOJ is too, is that a lot of people, when they get to that level, they don't care about the case anymore. They care about their promotion.
That's right.
So they want the short hits. They want to be able to do the stats. Hey, I did 20 arrests, 20 others, because they've got to be like,
win
hey,
on a Tuesday in November.
Exactly. They want to, whether it be promotion to the next level at the AUSA's office, or if it's a promotion at the FBI headquarters. I found at the Bureau side, the further people are getting away from being an agent in the field, the more they're forgetting of why
100%.
they're here.
100%.
Why they're here, and then they become politicians, and they're going, okay, this is what I need to do. And I was a street agent for 20 years, never took a desk. There were a couple opportunities where I looked at a desk, and there were certain reasons why I didn't take them. But the opportunity, and I loved being a street agent. I loved working the streets.
You get it. You're down on the level.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you get up, people forget. And there's countless times I ran into roadblocks, and that's one of the reasons why I was very happy to hang it up in 23 was that I'd put in for certain approvals that, because a lot of my cases had international ramifications. One individual who was, I was hunting, was a fugitive down in Mexico.
For a gang?
For MS-13.
Okay.
I can't get into details because it's under seal, but I can talk about the general investigation. I had him targeted. I found him. We were working on him. I was able to identify his location. I was able to identify his house. We had a team down in Mexico, working with the Mexican authorities, working with Mexican immigration, and it was a group called Joint Task Force Vulcan. So as one of the founding members, where I was picked by AG Barr under the Trump administration to go after the senior-most leadership in MS-13. I had this guy. He was indicted in the United States. We found him at the house. Teams, I'm not going to get into details, but the Mexican authorities kind of botched the hit, and he escaped. He was able to escape. Excellent relationship, though, with pretty good.
Really? You sure?
No, listen.
They sound real good at their jobs.
The team that did that hit that day, wasn't 4 stars on the Yelp. Okay.
Yeah.
The team that was supposed to be there was 4 stars, but the team that got there, so it was a swing and a miss.
Conveniently, they weren't there.
So he escaped. So in 2016, I captured a 10 Most Wanted. So I knew what needed to be done to get an individual put on 10 Most Wanted. So I said, this is a great candidate. This is a great candidate.
What do you mean what needs to be? So there's like a system to get on there? Wait, there's like a back office, like lottery system at the FBI? Like, I think my guy should be on there.
It's an application. You literally, they want to see, the FBI wants to see that, is he catchable? Do we have any information? Is it newsworthy? Can we get a lot of people to watching the perp walk, the coverage?
Mm-hmm.
Will it gain clicks? Obviously, in today's world. So
FBI's thinking about their Instagram. we need clout.
So and I tried to make argument to why, and there were certain people that at the Department of Justice that said no, and I've been told it was reasons that they didn't want another Hispanic male. This was during the Biden administration, that they didn't want another Hispanic male on the 10 Most Wanted. That's not why we're here. Listen, I presented to them, and fortunately, I went back to the drawing board. Exactly.
So basically, like DEI, FBI, Most Wanted. That's kind of where we're at here.
Well, not now.
God, we're so fucked.
Not now. Now it's getting good. But
now they're all Hispanic.
I ended up catching him.
How'd you catch him?
Just getting back to work, putting my knuckles down, and just doing just street agent work.
Well, that's the most boring answer of all time. How'd you really catch him?
It was really so. Again, can't really talk about it too much, but Task Force Vulcan was one of the great task forces that are out there right now. They are the lead dog. They've got the tip of the spear, and they've got a lot of support from the administration and DOJ, the executive branch, president. I know that they have a lot of support. So I worked with CBP, HSI, ATF, DEA, and we were able to localize him and capture him. And he is in custody here in the United States now.
Well, that's good.
Yep.
Glad to hear that. That's nice.
No, he's in custody, and he's facing the justice that he deserved.
Good. Well, it's also because you didn't leave long ago. You got out in summer 23.
Correct.
So it's been less than 2 years leaving the bureau. So you've been a part of what we call the modern day bureau.
Yeah.
In every way. So, and I know you got a lot of friends over there and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how things are used as a political football. But the point that you make to start on the first thread about the Department of Justice and the stats.
Yeah.
You know, I had said a few minutes ago I got mixed emotions on that 97, 98% conviction rate because two reasons. Number one, it's very similar to the conviction rate you see in China and Russia, which we don't want to be compared to. And on that note, I want justice to happen. So if someone's guilty, I hope they're fucking found guilty, and I hope we have the right lawyers and the right FBI team that's able to get them in there. But one guy I've cited as a real piece of shit on this podcast throughout hundreds of episodes, well, not mentioned on hundreds of episodes, but since, you know, probably episode 87, is Preet Bharara, because this guy literally was just a media whore and would parade himself around on his record. He liked to say, I'm like 88-0 against people on insider trading to make it seem like he was going after Wall Street, as in what people on Main Street thought was the Wall Street that did like 08. And really, he went after zero of those people because all he wanted was to win a case. And so actually a friend of mine is someone that, based on the way that this guy Raj Rajaratnam, based on the way that Preet litigated in the media his case back when I followed it when I was in high school, I thought the guy was guilty as hell. And then I actually reviewed the case and I'm like, son of a bitch, this isn't a popular opinion. He's a fucking billionaire hedge fund guy, but this case is actually crazy. The judge ends up getting a huge job afterwards, opening up his own law firm to do the same exact kind of law that he oversaw here. The fucking defense or the prosecutor, same thing, goes to defend insider trading people. They all write a paper 10 years later where they say this law is actually fucked. We shouldn't be putting people. And you see this, and yet all these people win because it's not even just for them. It's like they get to they're incentivized. If I'm going to actually defend them for a second, they're incentivized to do this record-keeping thing because the people who, you know, are running for governor or running for mayor are using their numbers on their ads for the Tuesday in November. And so if they don't make those people happy because it's just a stat, then, you know, we run into a problem. And so is there a way that this system can be fixed, or is it always cynically just going to kind of be like, it's going to be stats?
That's a world where I did not want to be.
We ingest a credit card's worth of microplastics every week, tiny particles in our food, water, and air. They don't just pass through either. They build up in our organs, disrupt our hormones, and are linked to fertility issues, neurological disorders, and heart disease. In early 2024, human brain samples contain 0.5% plastic by weight, with higher levels tied to Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative disorders. Microplastics have also been found in semen and placentas, correlating with lower sperm quality, fetal exposure, and declining fertility. BPA and phthalates mimic or disrupt hormones like estrogen or testosterone, leading to reduced sperm counts, irregular cycles, and developmental issues in children. With microplastics in bottled water, food, and even household dust, avoiding exposure is impossible, but you can support your body's ability to fight back. Moringa activates the NRF2 pathway, which is your body's detox switch, helping flush out microplastic-associated toxins like BPA, BPS, and phthalates. This pathway boosts detox enzymes, making harmful chemicals water-soluble for easier excretion. Not all moringa is created equal, though. Many supplements use lower-quality sources like root, bark, or contaminated powders, lacking the full spectrum of benefits. Plus, moringa naturally tastes bitter and unpleasant. It's kind of gross. And this is what led me to Morning Being by Verso, a rich, chocolatey coffee alternative packed with moringa, cocoa polyphenols, and electrolytes to help detox, fuel energy, performance, focus, and longevity. It's actually incredible how they mask the bitter notes of moringa because that tastes amazing. Verso only uses pure moringa leaf and conducts third-party testing on every batch to ensure its quality. You can't avoid microplastics, but you can support your body's detox process. Start your day with Morning Being for research-backed detox, energy, and health. Click the link below or visit ver.so and use code Julian for 15% off your order. Once again, that's code Julian at ver.so. The link is in the description below for 15% off your order.
That's why I stayed on the streets. That's, you know, for other people to say if we're ever going to change that, you know, that environment. I think that no matter, it doesn't matter if it's red, blue, left, right, we're going to have that. I mean, you know, whether it's, you know, certain side of the groups, you know, favoring and doing something like that. I think that's, and it's not just DOJ. I think that's it's a society thing of people, you know, worried about themselves and getting the Instagram and getting the attention in the media. So I think that's a general society issue. And it's not just an FBI. And I speak from experience on the FBI side because I was there for 20 years. So I agree 100%. and I don't know Preet and those cases that you speak about, so I can't speak from a position of knowledge. And so I take your word for it. And but it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me. There are very good AUSAs out there. They're great U.S. attorneys, who are the head of these U.S. attorneys. And then there are very good FBI guys. There's the assistant director in charge of the New York division, Jim Dennehy, was recently, forced to resign, by FBI leadership, where I agree with a lot of things that Director Patel is doing. I agree with it.
Oh, you do?
I do. Yeah. I think that he's making some good movements.
So why do you say that?
Because I think there's a lot of FBI leadership that, again, what we just talked about, that their only thought is, politically driven,
Yes.
And they've gotten away from being a street agent. There are certain people that are, in the media these days that speak from, a position of knowledge, and they were FBI leadership for 15 of their 20 years.
Right.
They were a supervisor, but they're speaking on TV, hey, I know how this investigation. How do you know? You don't know.
You're not
anything.
doing it.
You don't know anything about
That's
that
right.
investigation. There's a certain individual. I'm not going to name him. That he talked about Tren de Aragua, and he gave a comment to his network, and they wrote it in an article. And in the article, he wrote, he made a comment of saying, Tren de Aragua. He said most gang experts agree that Tren de Aragua is not a sophisticated gang. As soon as I saw it, I texted him because I have his phone number. I said, how can you say this? Well, and this is where this is where you understand why his response was his response. He said, well, I got this from, and he got a little, he got up in my face, via text message, but he said, well, did you work TDA? I said, yes, I did. Yes, I did. For the last year of my career, I worked TDA. He goes, well, my people at headquarters are telling me differently, and that's where I get my information from. And I said, that's why you're wrong.
Yep.
That's why you're wrong. I still talk to the guys that are in the streets, okay? I still talk to guys who are conducting these investigations. When I was conducting these investigations, we knew the truth, the reality. When it's written into a paper and then it gets up to those levels of headquarters, it's filtered, it's cleaned.
Yes.
They're not going to see the nitty-gritty dirt under the nails.
It's not in their
details.
backyard.
No.
Right.
So, yeah, of course, you're going to get somebody, well, they're not sophisticated. Again, they're not getting the Hispanic organized crime. It's not getting the respect that it should, of like, hey, this is a threat. TDA is a threat. They're sophisticated. They're money laundering. They've got gold mines in Venezuela that they're mining and using that gold to selling it, and then they're taking those funds. The Maduro leadership in Venezuela has allegedly given them these mines and said, here, you can mine these, use the money at your pleasure.
Right. He's a great delegator.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I texted him and said, how can you do it? Well, he goes, well, my contacts at FBI headquarters think differently. He goes, we can agree to disagree. I'm like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. And I said, and that's right there is an example of why I think that there's, and it's no joke. It's no secret. I go on CNN, Fox News. I've been interviewed multiple times, different agencies, when something happens. And a lot of these networks come to me because I've told them, I said, listen, I'll tell you how it is. I'll tell you why that guy is, being photographed as he's walking into the Bearcat. Yeah. So there was a fugitive in Pennsylvania 2 years ago that he crawled out of the prison in Pennsylvania. He was on the loose in the woods of Pennsylvania. And, he had been captured, and they were walking him into the Bearcat, and they were cutting the T-shirt off the back of his shirt, and they were taking pictures of his back. And an FBI expert was on a network, and it wasn't FBI, it was another agency. He was an expert, but he was like, I'm an expert. And the news commentator says to him, well, what are they doing here? Well, they're taking pictures of him because they want to identify him from his tattoos. I said, no, they're not. They're documenting any injuries that he has before he runs into the Bearcat. They've got him in cuffs. They've identified him. They know who he is. They look at any picture and going, that's our fugitive. But they're taking pictures so that they can document all his injuries before he gets in the Bearcat, so he can't say, well, this injury, this bruise was because they roughed me up. So it's just knowledge. So these networks, I've told them, I said, listen, I'll tell you why they're doing something. I know about wiretaps. I know about WhatsApp investigations. I know about this because I was just there. I was doing it. Obviously, time goes on. Now there's new investigative. So the further I get away from it, the more dated it is.
Yes.
So, and I'm pulling back from it a little bit from now to focus more on my career now, my company with Christine, my wife. But it's the whole point of saying, listen, your executives, you've gotten away from these investigations. You don't know what it is. You're worried about your career. You're worried about this, and that's where I was saying is, Jim Dennehy was he was my SAC my last 2 years at Newark. He was a good mix where he was part politician, part agent.
This is the guy
that was just asked to retire from in New York. And for whatever reason, I don't know, but he was told, you need to retire. And that was one of the mistakes I believe that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy.
Jim Dennehy. So I retired under his command. He was a good agent.
You don't know why he was asked to resign?
Again, my information is based upon what I see in the media. Right after the Department of Justice, the new administration took over, there was the Deputy Attorney General, I think his name is Beauvais, put forth a letter to the acting director, Driscoll, and said, I want the names of every single individual at the FBI that investigated January 6th. And he pushed back a little bit and saying, hold on. I don't know what was said. I don't know what was, but he just pushed back and he said, we will stand together. Basically, he's paraphrasing here. Jim Dennehy said to the FBI New York people, we're going to stand together. Whether it be a front, whether it be just like, we're going to stand as a family.
Meaning we'll all take responsibility for being a part of that investigation.
I don't know. Again, you'd have to look up exactly what the words he said. And I believe that was probably why he was dismissed or asked to resign. There were a couple, I agree with some things that Director Patel is doing and asking certain people to resign and saying, hey, you got to go.
Do you see why, and I want to I want to be careful here too with you, because I know you have friends there and everything, and I don't want you to say stuff on the record that you don't want to say and stuff like that. But do you see why the trust in the FBI is at an all-time low right now with people, and why someone like this, when he takes a stance like that, would be asked to step aside because of those people who sit in the offices specifically that you just outlined?
No, absolutely. I absolutely can see why, the trust in the FBI is at an all-time low. But I think a lot of it is misplaced. A lot of it is misguided. So? There is a general perception, I think, out there of people saying that the FBI is corrupt to the core. There are certain people say the FBI is corrupt to the core. And I vehemently disagree with that. Now, I can speak only from the agent's perspective because I was a street agent for 20 years. And to say that the street agents are rotten to the core is absolutely false.
Yeah, that's unfair.
Unfair and false. When it goes up, that's a different story. I can only speak from experience of me with certain individuals, and I can say exactly, it goes back to, yes, that there are problems. They're politically driven individuals. But do I believe that there are individuals at the FBI who are saying, we need to target this group, we need to target that group because of my personal beliefs? I don't believe that. I don't believe.
Not even at that high level, though? Because we've seen that happen.
Well, what I believe is that there are certain individuals, yes, and it looks back like, working Hispanic organized crime. I believe that they're going to say, hey, let's focus looking at this group, okay? Listen, there's nothing wrong with looking at a group, okay? Whether they open, and here's the important word, probable cause.
Yes.
If they have probable cause to believe that any group, religious based, it doesn't matter, whether ethnically, religiously, if they believe, that group is violating a federal crime, that group, they can open up a federal investigation because they have probable cause. So if they believe that group is committing a crime, hey, listen, investigate them, collect the evidence, go before a judge, and then prove it and say, hey, listen, but just opening up a case against somebody because I don't like,
you're targeting them.
That's targeting. That's absolutely wrong. And I don't believe that is happening. And again, I'm saying that I don't believe because I wasn't in 5 other divisions.
Speak for 35,000 employees.
I can't speak for 35,000.
Right.
But is there probably, just like any other company in this United States. Are there bad people in the FBI? Of course there are.
Every corporation, like even ones that, let's, for the sake of argument here, talk about ones that do things mostly the right way or whatever. Every corporation has a bad office. It has bad people.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's a lot of good people. And the problem is all it takes is a few bad people to pull down the reputations of everyone else, especially when people aren't there to see it. So I do agree with you, by the way, and it seems unpopular to say this, but I'll stand by this. There are a lot of people at the FBI who do amazing work and are doing their job the right way and are really trying to seek justice. It's the problem is that there are people that have been involved in some of these investigations, including on President Trump, that it's like, this is such like you're going through his wife's panties drawer. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Right.
Like there's nothing, and objectively, whether you like Trump or not, those cases were bullshit. There's nothing to say that anything that was handled there, or even how they handled some of the people that were just walking around on January 6th, not some of the people like actually breaking windows and shit like that. It's like you see stuff like this and you're like, guys, this is a little too much. And not to give the FBI an out here. However, I would be remiss to say, you know, as someone who doesn't work in there and doesn't know how it works specifically, I would imagine there's also pressure coming from above them in some cases that then comes down and forces them to look bad sometimes.
Well, here, I'll give you an example of how one little piece was taken and flipped over, and it was a situation that was created for the masses, and it was tweeted and retweeted, and everyone talked about it for 2 weeks. And just got up in arms regarding the Trump investigation. I was not involved in the Trump investigation, so I don't know anything about it. But there was one time when certain people on the right side took a hold of the deadly force policy that was utilized during the search warrant, whether you agree with the search warrant or not, and the search warrant was executed at Mar-a-Lago. Inside the search warrant, every single search warrant, there's the deadly force policy. And it clearly states, and for every individual, deadly force is not authorized unless certain criteria are lifted. Well, certain people on the right side took that and said, oh, there was a list in there to assassinate Trump. They went in there looking to assassinate.
It's literally the same thing as every,
Right. And that caught wind, and it was a story for 2 weeks, and then it moved on. But the fact of the matter is people heard that story in that 2 week window, and they believed it. They believed that there was that operation at Mar-a-Lago was was a search with an attempted assassination.
Right.
Which is completely ludicrous. Because when you stop and talked about it at the end of the 2 weeks, they're like, oh, okay, let's move on to the next story. And that's what we've become these days. It's just a quick, hey, let's take a story, blow it up to something it's not, and then let's besmirch. And that's how the FBI.
That is how it works, yes.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
And that's the world we live in today. And then I try to come on here and say, listen, the FBI is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Can it be improved? Absolutely. Do I hope Director Patel improves it? Absolutely. I would love to see a much better and stronger and streamlined FBI. But to say that it's rotten to the core, absolutely not.
Yeah, I always talk about this. I cite it on so many podcasts in different contexts. I never get sick of it because it's so true. But like the universal physics law, for every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction to create equilibrium in the middle.
Right.
When your pendulums are like this, you can live with that, right? Because it's nice and smooth. When your pendulums get out here and they do this, they're creating that middle with the extremes.
Right. But this pendulum right here, that doesn't get the clicks. That doesn't get the bleed. If it bleeds, it
exactly
leads.
right.
It's got to be out here.
That's exactly
that
right.
gets the, woo, I need it more extreme. How extreme can I get it? Blah, 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 blah. And the truth doesn't really matter anymore.
It doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't.
This is what matters. This is what gets the people, the clicks, the links, the discussion, and having the conversations. And listen, I know there are people who are watching this who are not going to agree with me. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Listen, let's have a discussion. Let's talk about it.
Yes,
Hey,
that's what we're doing.
Let's talk about it. And that's fine.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
Listen, I am not a politician. I never was a politician, and that's probably why I wasn't selected to be a supervisor and move up the chain of command. Listen, I know plenty of supervisors, and I know plenty of leadership at the FBI who are phenomenal people. I was just not of that breed. I just liked staying on the streets. No one, well, excuse me, Stamberg. there are few people that could sit down and how should I put this? Let's say, listen, I'm pretty good at what I did. Pretty good at what I did. Okay. There are some great people that are still working it, and there are great people that worked behind me, and there will always be great people, working Hispanic organized crime, gangs, transnational criminal organizations. And listen, you want to criticize how I worked? That's fine. I'm always open to criticism. Listen, during my trial, I spent 2 days on being cross-examined during my trial in 2020. In 2021, correct. I spent 2 days
MS-13 in Union City.
Correct.
Okay.
I spent 2 days, convicting. We went up against 3 guys because they had 3 attorneys. So and they criticized, and that's their job. The defense attorneys are saying, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? That's their job. But, and I was criticized, and when I made, certain decisions.
What was the decision they criticized, for example?
Geez. I'd have to go back. I'd have to go back and look at the transcript. I mean, like I said, that was something in the past. I'd have to go back and remember, but it was that's their job. And like I said, I'm more than happy to sit in front of somebody. But the important thing is, and we're getting away from this in societies, having discussions, having conversations, saying, listen, you agree with what your side, I agree with what my decisions are. Hey, let's have a conversation. Why do you think that? Why do I think this?
Right.
And not say, hey, you're evil because you think that, and I'm evil, you're evil. So that's where I think we're getting away from.
I think a lot more people out there, and they're not the ones who go into comment sections, for example, or who tweet the posts to get the most likes and stuff like that. But I think a lot more people than we realize do, like listening right now, in fact, do have nuance in these scenarios. Maybe they lean left or they lean right on certain things, but like they like to listen to conversations like this because they like to hear the things that, they can think about more and decide for themselves. The problem is exactly what you said. You couldn't have put it any better, which is that unfortunately, like you used it bleeds, it leads line that you guys had within the agency, but that's exactly what it is on social media. If I go out and I say something that is hardcore on the left or hardcore on the right, I'm going to incite mass agreement and mass disagreement at the same time, and it's going to go straight up through the algorithm. If I say something that says, well, I can see this or not see that, it doesn't do it as much for people because it's like, all right, well, all right, moving on to the next one. They want to feel that feeling of like team or like anti.
And like I said, I'll be straight up, and we talked about this before. I'm not of that world. Yeah. I'm not of that world that's going to give, the sound bite. I don't like that.
Good.
I don't, listen, I have my opinions, I have my political leanings, and, I live in Montana for a reason. So
big old Democrat.
It's a beautiful state. It's a beautiful state of Montana. Let's just say that. So, and I want my kids raised in a certain, environment, in a certain world. And I like, Montana is
with no Dunkin' Donuts. That's bad parenting.
Dunkin' Donuts.
Damn it.
Seriously. I mean, it's, if Dunkin' Donuts is listening, please reach out to me. I would love to talk about opening franchises up there. But there's a company called City Brew.
He wants to franchise them.
I will help set them up. Now I may end up being like 500 pounds here in a couple of years, but D&D. So yeah, their stock prices and they're whenever we come back here to New Jersey, they could see their revenues probably go up through their roof because we're just hitting D&D every day.
Yeah.
So
gotcha. Well, what is the thing you're most looking for? If we're sitting here 3 years from now and Kash Patel was in charge of the FBI during that whole time, what kinds of things would you like to see that you think would be like a win for the FBI's brand moving forward?
I think that, moving forward, it's going to continue going down the road where they're going right now and, improve it and streamline it. Again, I don't think that the Bureau is, leans one way or the other. I don't believe that the Bureau is, hard left. I don't believe the Bureau is hard right. The street agents. I'm talking about the street agents.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
And that's an important distinction. I'm not going to speak of a position where, FBI headquarters. FBI headquarters needs to be improved. They needs to be streamlined. I think it's gotten a little too fat. And I think Director Patel's a decision to move out 1,000 agents back into the field I think is a great decision. Get them back into the field. Do I think that FBI headquarters is, the what was the words he used? The deep state, the headquarters of the deep state. I don't believe that. So that's just, again, but I don't believe it because I've never spent time at headquarters other than some short stints. I'd like to see more attention to, real crime, and, them focusing on, things that are the threats to national security. The terrorism branch, the CT branch, the criminal branch, they're doing a great job. I mean, there are so many wins, and you were talking about the conviction rate. There are so many cases that the public never hears about because they get the news. I mean, there's certain ones that are bigger ones that sure. There's publicity, put out on them, but it's not, like you said, it's not the wins that we're, the Bureau it's the losses, the misses.
For sure. Even as a street agent, though, I'm curious your mentality on this. It's a weird question to ask because, your job is to go find the bad guys. And when you get your eyes on the bad guys, make the case and bring it to justice.
Yes.
But removing the politics of, a record of, I've won X number of cases versus only this number of losses.
If we get those people out, then yes, I think we'll get a lot more work done.
But even on the street level, for guys like you who were working the cases and actually building them, if you built a case where obviously you've now brought it to the prosecutor because you think that whoever, the person you built it against, let's say it's one guy, is guilty of what they did. And you think that from an honest perspective and because you did your best on the case, looking yourself in the mirror, there was no confirmation bias, stuff like that. You built a case and you're like, yeah, I think this guy did this. And then it got to trial and it became very clear or perhaps even slightly.
Let me interrupt you for
sure.
a second here on something you just said. I never would bring a case to the U.S. Attorney's Office where I think they did it. I never would, because that's what the evidence is for. I would bring a case to the U.S. Attorney's because I know they did it. I have the physical evidence.
Okay.
I have the statements. I have tickets. I have photographs, and I would find it very, very hard to believe that an FBI agent would bring a case, and I'd have a very difficult time believing the U.S. Attorney would bring a case that they think he did it.
Let's go with your language then.
they did it.
You know he
Correct.
did it. And then it gets to court, and not just because they have some sick Johnny Cochran level attorney who's really good at his job, but literally because new evidence comes out in court where you're like, wait a minute.
Yep.
I knew he did this and now I'm thinking he didn't. Would you view it as a victory for the United States if therefore he were found not guilty because of something that you, through no fault of your own, didn't come across in your investigation and now you don't get the win on it?
I didn't care about getting the win. I wanted to make sure that the bad people were put in jail. If I collected all this evidence showing that these individuals did what they did, and there was evidence showing that person wasn't there at the scene, I want the correct judgment. I don't care if it's a not guilty. Good. That's fine. I don't care about that. I want to make sure if he did such things, he needs to go to jail.
Right.
For me, I didn't care about the stats.
And if he didn't,
he shouldn't go to jail.
Got it.
100%.
I like that.
No. I never would want somebody who didn't do something, even if they were a hardened gang member and I know they're just sick and a danger to the community. If I'm there to say, hey, listen, this is all the work I did to show that they did this. If there's something to say that, then I wouldn't want them in jail at all. No.
Yeah. The other thing with a lot of these cases that I see it from both sides because it's so hard. It's when you have to build a complicated case, especially a RICO case or something like that. I don't see how you build that case without having informants, right? You have to have informants.
Correct.
Right? Which means you also have to have people that you catch being guilty of something, whatever it is, and then they turn state's witness because you're trying to get up above them, right? I agree. I think that's how you have to build the case. The other side of it that I've seen in cases that frustrates me is that sometimes this is taken advantage of, though, because you'll get someone who's now who's already a criminal. They'll lie for anything, and they're incentivized to say whatever you want them to say.
Correct. And I would never want somebody who's going to lie and give me something just to get. So a lot of the incentives we had in MS-13 cases was so either to get a reduced sentence if they were part of the clique, part of the crime, they get reduced sentence, or if we had informants, they'd get incentives towards immigration status. And, so they may be an illegal immigrant in the country, and we'd give them a certain visa that they could stay here in the country throughout it and could afford them the ability to apply.
Wow.
So they'd get an incentive to stay here temporarily, and then they would get a pathway to citizenship. So it never was guaranteed. Nothing was ever guaranteed to any of my informants. I never said to them, I guarantee you I will get you this. My always statement was, I'm going to work my hardest.
I'm going to do my best.
I'm going to do my best.
They walk out, you're like...
Because ultimately, the people who decide is the Department of Justice. As an FBI agent, I can never guarantee, and I never guaranteed anything to anybody.
That's good.
I just said I will try my best to get you this immigration status so that you could get a pathway to citizenship because you've cooperated.
It's like that Drewski one where he's like, got good news and bad news. Good news is we got your payment. Bad news is they gave you life. Sayonara. You're like, I tried.
So I always wanted to, work with the informants and get the information, the right information there. And sometimes it worked out and sometimes it don't. Working with informants and, like you said, people that you bring them forward and you present them the evidence you've collected.
Right.
And then they see it and they're like, okay, if I go to trial, I could be facing 20 to 30 years. Or if I testify, I could get a reduced sentence. And again, the Department of Justice would never guarantee you, because ultimately it was the decision of the judge,
right,
what the sentencing was. But they would say what was called a 5K letter. They would see it and they'd be like, okay, this person testified on such and such a date and provided this, and they'd get a list of all the cooperation. And then the judge would make a sentence based upon their decision.
Right. And the judge usually, like in a lot of these cases I follow, they're generally within the ballpark in those types of situations.
Yes.
Okay.
So the U.S. Attorney's Office would make their recommendation and saying, hey, listen, based upon his cooperation, we believe a sentence between, certain window. And then the judge would look at that, what they're recommending versus what crime they've committed, and why they're there, and then the cooperation. So that three, and I'm sure there's other factors that the judges take into consideration, and then they make a sentencing. So I knew we had a lot of people who would rather, provide information than spend 30 years in jail.
For sure.
And now they're doing 10 to 15. Now, here's the thing is, a lot of these guys, these MS-13 members, they're illegal immigrants. So even though they cooperated, they're reduced sentence.
Tom Homan's getting them.
Tom Homan's getting them at the end. At the end of their 10 years, Tom Homan's
He's
getting them.
He's outside the prison like, come with me.
Let's go. Yeah, I got a flight for you. So, yeah.
All right, well. Better than being in prison, I guess, getting deported.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder how they're dealt with, though, back at home if they ratted. That's the thing.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe it is better to be in prison.
Maybe.
They should have thought about that.
Maybe.
Anyway, not your problem. But back to the actual gangs. We got on a good long tangent there. I like that. But we started talking about the Trinitarios, and you were initially talking about like their structure and how they have, what'd you say, a program manager?
At MS-13.
That was MS-13.
MS-13's got a program manager, right.
So, and then we were getting into MS-13's like setup. So you said MS-13 has a program manager, and they have like an East Coast group, a West Coast group, and all that. Like, how many MS-13 members do we estimate are operational in the U.S. at any one time?
That's a good question these days. I mean, the numbers fluctuated because one of the things that really motivates members of joining a group is how popular they are on the TV. What's the popular group right now? TDA. So I believe that those numbers are booming right now because, especially with the the illegal migrant community that's in this country now, they see that who is the group that everybody's talking about, and there's Aragua. So we want to those, they gravitate towards those people. So I believe their recruiting numbers are way up. I think that there are thousands of like legit TDA members and then thousands of lower tier 12, 13, 14-year-old kids.
12, 13, 14-year-old kids they're getting for this.
You'll see, 2 years ago in Times Square, you had, out of the Roosevelt Hotel, you had 12, 13, 14-year-olds that were being recruited into TDA. And then
how would they recruit them?
Hey, we're TDA. What do you want? You want to make money?
Like in the migrant center, they go in
Yeah.
there?
If you look up at the Roosevelt Hotel, you know, they were doing that. So you'd have 12, 13, 14-year-olds going out into Times Square, and they were pickpocketing, stealing from people, and NYPD would get them, but they're 12 years old. So what they would do is just a slap on the wrist, and they'd be back at the Roosevelt Hotel that night. So yeah, so right there, those are good photos right there they're all children in Times Square, and they're thrown up because, hey, TDA is now the cool group. So,
and it's always Venezuelans in it, right?
As far as I know, yes. MS-13 has Hondurans, Guatemalans, El Salvadorians, and I think that, you know, generally, I would say is Venezuelans are TDA.
When did TDA first come across your desk?
So TDA came across my desk in, I retired in 23 in September. So in spring of 23, I flew to South America to represent the FBI at a multinational conference where a lot of the countries from South America and Central America were there to discuss a new gang called Aragua. And they were there to discuss it. And so Chile has really taken the brunt of it. Chile has taken a lot of the brunt of the TDA activity.
A lot of Venezuelans in Chile, huh?
They've moved south. Yeah, they moved through Peru into Chile, and then there's a lot because it's a very affluent communities in Chile.
When you say they move, are they literally? I mean, that's a long way. They're not like walking in caravans, are they? Or they find it more
cars? I mean, you just drive from one country to the next.
And you can do that down there pretty easily, like that.
It's
even
not
if
like
you're those guys.
Yeah, even if you're those guys. So they go down there via their communities, via their transit system, and how they get down there, and they're just going to Chile. And so a lot of the crimes you're seeing, like in Aurora, El Paso, a lot of things that are getting the media attention these days that Aragua is doing, they've been doing it for years in Chile. They've been doing it for years. The apartment takeover, they did that for years in Chile. So
how are they doing that in Chile? They just like go in and say, "This is like Captain Phillips. This is ours now."
Yep, it's as simple as that. This is our building now. In Aurora, so I knew about Aurora about 3 to 4 months before it actually hit the press.
Yeah, why were people trying to say like they didn't do that, or like, well, it was only one building? Like, what
because
the
it's
fuck?
politically motivated. It was all politics. It was all 100%. Aurora was absolute bullshit because it was all politics. Oh no, there's nothing. And I always joke about it. And then, the movie, there's back in the 1900s, a movie called The Naked Gun, right? And there's a guy standing in front of a burning building. Nothing to see here. The fireworks going off in the background. Nothing to see. That's exactly what happened in Aurora. It was crap. So I knew about Aurora about 3 months before it hit the media. And I was talking to building management and saying, don't do anything. Don't shut it down.
Oh, you were talking with the actual building management of the
I was trying to help them out. Yeah.
Whoa.
They reached out to me because they found out, what I did and that I was retired. So I was talking to building management and I was like, listen, this is a great RICO case. Don't because they were planning on shutting the building down. And if you shut the building down, all the members are going to scatter.
Yeah.
So I was like, don't do anything.
Just let them run.
Just let the FBI or HSI do their investigation. You've got a great RICO case here. You want to disrupt it, but the ball was already in motion to shut the buildings down. So there's nothing I can do about it. And then it hit the media, and then it was done. All those members scattered. So once that woman released the video of the guys walking down in the hallways with the long guns, that was done. It was all those members left. So that the in the aftermath of that, so there was an acting police chief in Aurora, which was I believe it's a Republican mayor, but a Democrat city, the city council, everything like that. And of course, law enforcement wants to be like, oh, there's nothing to see here. We're fine. Democratic governor saying absolutely no, there's no gang problem. It's an isolated incident. Well, there was a video that's out there. It was the acting chief of police of Aurora. So it was before him, right before him. It was a female. So she does. Yes, that's the video right there. So she's acting right out that building. Right. What's not known about this is that video camera. She's making it look like she's talking to the media. That camera was the Office of Public.
Oh, it was her PR.
Here's
division?
her PR people.
Oh my God.
Videotaping this. Now she's standing in front of a building, which that's not one of the 3 buildings TDA took over. Okay. And on top of that, so she's saying, yeah, there's no problems here. And then on top of that, she got her officers, they've got video of them knocking on doors and saying, do you have a problem here? Is there a gang problem in this building? While the camera's pointed, of course the people are gonna be like, no, there's nothing to see here. There's nothing to see here. We're totally fine. And then, but here's really what's not told. These buildings right here were swept by SWAT right before they showed up. So of course there's not gonna be any gang members walking around here with guns. I mean, this is such a setup. This was such crap setup of saying, oh, we've got nothing here. This is fine. That's not even one of the buildings that was taken over by TDA. But that's the complex, but not one of the buildings.
And this lady got fired?
No. I don't know what happened to her because there was no controversy. There was never anybody discussed. I mean, I've heard, about, this story right here, but I don't think anybody got in trouble for it.
How did you hear about the actual details behind the scenes like that?
So I talked to the former ICE director in Colorado, John Fabricatore. John is a great guy. So he ran for Congress in Colorado, didn't win, but he works with the Heritage Group. He helps out the foundation and the Trump administration with their immigration issues as an advisor. And I've spoken to him, and he told me, and Danielle Jurinsky, who's a politician, this is her, Aurora is her district in Colorado. I've spoken to her. So you hear the stories, but like I said, it's not going to get reported. So, and it's yesterday's news, so it really doesn't matter anymore. But the current police chief, I believe he is doing a good job from what I understand. I see that they're cracking down.
So there's no more buildings that are run by those guys right now.
I don't know about that. I don't think that they're there because those all scattered. So here's the crazy thing is Montana's got a big problem with TDA and cartels up there. In northeastern Montana, near the Canadian border, there were 3 individuals that were arrested, and it was drug-related offense. One of the 3 is from Aurora, Colorado. It was a Venezuelan from memory. So
small world. Yeah.
When the light gets shined, the cockroaches go in different directions. And I've spoken about this, and I'm saying, listen, I'm glad ICE has taken out 6 TDA members that were in Bozeman. There were 6 TDA members in Bozeman, in town in Montana, and those 3 in northeastern Montana. Great. I'm glad ICE is taking them out. But those aren't the 6 that I'm worried about. I'm worried about the 15, 20 others that are still there that no one knows about. There's a reason why those 6 moved there, okay? Because there's a network already built up. There's already a safe haven for them. So, and that's the criminal element where I was talking about earlier, that you need those 3 things. Until you get those 3 things, getting rid of 6 members, that's just a temporary fix. It's a good fix, but it's just temporary.
Yeah, what does their network look like in the United States? Like, what's their command structure?
I think that's yet to be determined. I think a lot of people, they have communications to Venezuela. There is they're using social media. They're using WhatsApp groups. They're using Telegram. They're using Signal to communicate with one another. And we know that there is clear command and structure. So the kidnappings may be done in South America where the ransom is being collected in the United States. So they're communicating. Whether there's a concerted effort by all TDA members across the country, I don't think it's there. I think that you have a lot of pockets of TDA members, but they're all, they're
almost like subsidiaries then.
Correct.
Okay.
They're almost franchised.
Yeah.
So, and you have 1 or 2 members who are hardcore, members that were trained in Venezuela, and then they'll have like 30 members, who are 12, 13, 14-year-olds who are in that district, that region. Now, whether that one individual is getting orders, I think that's yet still being worked at. I mean, that's still being investigated by, the Bureau, HSI, and, determine the exact, elements of it, because it really is, a new, and I try and stay away from calling them a gang, especially now that President Trump has designated them a terrorist organization.
Oh, they are too.
Mm-hmm. I think it's 6 cartels, MS-13, and TDA have been designated terrorist organizations. So, which I like. It opens up.
That.
I do like it because it opens up totally new type of abilities for the investigators that, again, I'm a little bit jealous them going, a whole branch, the national security branch, which was going after ISIS and Al-Qaeda, all those tools and all those elements that they can use towards their investigation. Now the guys that were working, they're working investigating TDA now is at their disposal. So they can use those tools to investigate TDA, MS-13 and things like that, and the cartels. And hopefully I see, a great promise with Mexico. I see that, they brought us 29, including Rafael Caro Quintero.
Yep.
They brought him, RCQ, and 28 other, cartel members that were wanted here in the United States. That's great. Now, whether we go kinetic and send troops into Mexico, I don't know. That's loaded.
That's the issue.
I think that we would be better off, hopefully we work with the Mexican authorities and, whether it be kind of like, hey, we have Green Berets or SEALs that are embedded in those units and providing them intelligence, providing them, hard intelligence like aircraft, drones. I think that would be a much better start, but just, going all out and just, sending SEAL Team 6 into an area where I think that's dangerous. I think that's a dangerous road we're going down.
Yeah, I just had Ed Calderon in here, and he was actually calling this years ago that this would probably happen. And since the second Trump administration came in, obviously that upped the chances, and then it did. But he seemed to have, like, what would you say, like mixed feelings on it, Alessi? Fair to say? Yeah. So when you declare something a terrorist organization, like, are you going to go at them with drone warfare like we do in the Middle East with certain ones of these organizations? And then how it was when any Al-Qaeda guys or ISIS cells were even slightly spotted in the United States. Like it was like a full-blown, forget SWAT team, like fucking 12 levels above that. Think about how ingrained like 12, 13, and 14-year-olds who are just like running and doing pickpocketing in the United States are. It's like, how do you litigate that?
See, my question is, so you look at the definition of a terrorist group and I don't know the exact literal definition part of the U.S. Code is, but it is a group that's committing an act of violence on behalf of, their ideology. Religious, whatever their ideology is. Mm-hmm. And it's in an effort to create terror in the victims, right? So right now you're looking at it as, okay, are the cartels doing that? Are they just a business selling drugs, which is killing our youth, our people? Yes. Are they doing that here in the United States, committing acts of violence? I don't know if I would go that far. Is TDA doing that? Again, I don't know. Do we have the capacity to go there? Absolutely. And that's the dangerous part is like, if we go kinetic into Mexico, I think the cartels have such a structure that they could go in that they start conducting attacks as retaliation for Mexico, acts in Mexico. We're not seeing subways blowing up. We're not seeing car bombs that the cartel, like they used to do in Colombia when, what's his name? In Medellin cartel, Pablo Escobar was doing car bombs and blowing up planes. That's terrorism, right? That's straight up terrorism. We're not seeing that, and maybe I'm not seeing something. And again, I don't, I never worked the cartels, but I think that's a dangerous route we're going down. But that's the world we have, and I wouldn't be opposed. I'm not saying, oh, we can't, peace, no. We need to, these guys, respond to, they're going to treat us with violence if we have to, we have to respond with violence, and take them out. I think that there's again a dangerous route because there could be a lot of innocent people that are, they embed themselves in their communities. Whereas, these guys don't wear uniforms. I mean, CJNG, they do wear uniforms. A lot of their elite units do wear uniforms, but let's say we attack a village, where we know is a large drug stop. I mean, how do we know who is, cartel versus who is? Again,
weird,
right? It gets weird, and this is a conversation I'm totally open to having. Saying, listen, convince me, and you're your other guest. Show me the different ways. Again, I wouldn't wouldn't understand, the different ways. So it's it's a different world. It's that we're dealing with now. And TDA, we know that they've conducted acts of terror in Chile. So about a year ago, I want to say it's about a year ago, there's a lieutenant in the Venezuelan army who fled Venezuela. He was opposed to the Maduro administration. He fled Venezuela, went to Chile, was hiding out there. TDA found him, kidnapped him, tortured him, and killed him. And,
so they're like real Maduro guys.
Right. That's what I'm saying is they are an arm of the Maduro administration, the TDA, the entire TDA branch. And that's why I think TDA is so dangerous, that with a flip of a switch, he could turn them on and become, initiate something. We know he's done that. Now, whether the TDA members in Chile directly received orders, I think that's what the investigation is still going on. But it got publicity in Chile. But he was against Maduro. He ends up getting kidnapped by TDA and tortured and killed. Yeah, put one and one together. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah.
So they are a terrorist organization. The MS-13 is a terrorist organization in other countries. El Salvador has designated them a terrorist organization. We've charged MS-13 members here in the United States with terrorist charges, and TDA is they've done acts of terror in other countries. So, I mean, I'm glad that they've done this designation because especially with the cartels. But now my next question is, what about the other cartels? There's tons of cartels out there, Colombian, Venezuelan. Where's the line? Should we just do all cartels?
Who's the clicks?
What's that?
Who's the clicks?
Who's going to get the clicks?
Yeah. And that's what it sounds like. They pick the ones that the average person hears about. They pick the main Mexican cartels. They pick MS-13. They pick Tren de Aragua.
Yes.
And it's like because they can get attention on that. Whereas like people, when you say Colombian cartel, they're like, oh yeah, fucking 40 years ago.
Yeah, nobody's talking right. There's a cartel in Venezuela, Cartel del Sol, Cartel of the Sun.
Great name.
I know it is. It's very good.
Good branding.
Excellent. They're a big name cartel.
Yeah.
Why aren't they designated? Why aren't they a terrorist organization?
Do they work with Maduro?
I don't know. I'm assuming they do.
Because that was interesting. I did a YouTube live last year when the whole Venezuela thing came down, where there was like the election crisis and all that.
Yeah.
Which, funny, you haven't heard anything since then.
Yeah.
But Maduro's obviously.
I want to say that the guy who won, who's now in Spain, the guy who ended up winning, I want to say that there's an active arrest warrant that the Maduro issued, and that they're hunting him, the winner.
Yeah.
And they've charged him with all kinds of crimes. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, though, he holds on to power, and the sanctions go through the roof as well from the United States. So it's a tough spot for the United States to be in because they're hostile to us and everything. But it seems like the timing of Tren de Aragua really popping off here lines up with that. I had Jorge Ventura in here. We recorded towards the end of July 2024. And then I put out the episode like 3 weeks later in August. But literally, he was sounding the alarm on Tren de Aragua. I was like, oh, wow, this is the first I'm hearing about this. And then Aurora happened like 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's also right around the time the election thing happens. And it does feel like you keep making it sound like it's almost like his activated sleeper cell in a way. It certainly feels that way.
No, listen, the conversation I'm glad I talked to a lot of these guys, that the conversation of Tren de Aragua is being had. But it needs to continue being had and past the 15 minutes. This is a real threat. The Hispanic organized crime element is a real threat to this country. They're here, and we need to get investigators who speak Spanish to come on board.
Are they dropping bodies a lot? I mean, MS-13 I know is like we've seen that, but do we see Tren de Aragua dropping bodies in different communities in America?
I haven't heard many of them. And I think they're going. See, here's why TDA is dangerous, because they've learned what doesn't work. What doesn't work, and that's why they're MS-13 2.0. A lot of people have been calling them MS-13 2.0 because they've learned from the mistakes of the past. Trinitarios are smart and have learned they stay under the radar. They don't cause the, they don't bring the attention upon themselves. They don't do a butchering and murdering and then what happens after that? Because the media gets the attention. And what happens after media gets attention? The police and law enforcement. So they're not going to do things that are going to rock the ship. They're going to, create the waves. And that's why a great example is, you don't have investigators poking. Again, I am not involved in Montana law enforcement, but in my opinion, there is not a emphasis being conducted in law enforcement in Montana into these groups because they don't know how to investigate these groups because they don't have the Hispanic, investigators up there. They've never had the reason to learn how cartels and Tren de Aragua and MS-13 and all these groups, the structure. They don't have the experienced agents, whether it be officers or FBI, because that's not what's been the normal up in Montana. Here in New Jersey, I know, 3 or 4 different FBI agents here in the state of New Jersey that are working that because there's a need for it here. There's never been a need for that up there. So now they're flourishing up there, the Hispanic organized crime elements, because they're doing the smart thing. They're staying under the radar. They're not creating the waves which will draw the attention. So they're getting, they're able to sell their narcotics. They're able to, but they're not doing the things like the butchering, the shootings, and things like that, because that'll bring the attention. I mean, look at the attention that Aurora got. As soon as that got into the media, boom, everybody paid attention to Aurora.
So like their businesses to be able to create income for themselves. You mentioned earlier, like they'll literally do things as low as having the 12, 13, 14-year-olds go pickpocket and stuff like that. You also mentioned that they'll run scams and Trentarios, Tren de Aragua, where maybe I'm filling in words here, maybe they're even using AI and stuff like that to do that kind of thing now. But from a narcotics perspective, how much of their business do you think is that, and what's the supply line look like there? Is it their own kind of cartel they're setting up, or are they getting supplied from the cartels in Mexico? How's that working?
So from what I've understood is they're working with Sinaloa and CJNG. There's I wouldn't say an alliance.
Can you say what CJNG is?
So CJNG is the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Cartel Jalisco de Nueva Generación, CJNG. So they are pretty much sort of the tip of the spear right now of cartels. They've grown an army. They literally have, uniformed members. They have armored vehicles. They've got the top-notch, armor of weapons, and
it's crazy.
It's crazy to look at this, and that's what's the most amazing thing is the lack of attention that we as a society here in the United States, I'm talking about DOJ and talking about media, everything, the whole 9 yards, the lack of attention that we've paid to South America is absolutely mind-boggling. And not just Hispanic organized crime, just the lack of attention. China has moved in to South America, Central America, and the Caribbean too.
Where in the Caribbean?
Where did I just read that there was they've moved into the Caribbean in certain islands?
Can we type in China moving into Caribbean? Oh, you already did it. Look at that.
Yeah, so the Belt and Road.
Caribbean becoming Chinese Lake?
That's it, Chinese Lake. Correct. That's the article. That's just a week ago.
All right, let me read this real fast for everyone out there. Go down. Okay, on December 2nd, 1823, wow, we're going back. President James Monroe gave his 7th State of the Union address before Congress, using the occasion to advance what would later be known as the Monroe Doctrine. After a string of former Spanish colonies in Americas declared their independence, Monroe said the United States would oppose further predation in the region from the European empires to preserve the newly emancipated states. As American power exploded during the 19th and early 20th centuries, the Monroe Doctrine evolved and increasingly came to mean Washington's opposition to any potentially hostile foreign power establishing itself in the Americas. With this and a variety of more mercantile motives in mind, the U.S. made a series of military interventions in Latin America and the Caribbean. However, the past few decades have seen a dramatic increase in Chinese economic and diplomatic influence across the region, with one foreign policy expert telling Newsweek that Beijing wants to, quote, turn the Caribbean Sea into a Chinese lake, unquote. Let's go down. There are also concerns that cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, imposed by President Donald Trump's administration since it took over in January, could weaken American influence in the Caribbean. One regional expert described the move to Newsweek as a huge gift to Beijing. Newsweek reached out to Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the U.S. State Department for comment via email. Okay, so go ahead.
So what it is this is just a small. The Chinese have been moving into South America, and it's called the Pink Wave. So
The Pink Wave.
The Pink Wave it's been going on for like 20 years.
Very progressive.
So if you look at exactly, So if you look at a lot of the administrations in South America, a lot of them were very socialist leaning. And a lot of it is saying because of the Chinese influence. They were coming in, it's called the Belt and Road Project.
Yes, they do it through financial influence, soft power.
Exactly. And they influence and they support certain elected officials and get those people into position. It's a long game from China. They're playing the long game. They recently bought in Peru a seaport. I want to say it was $2 billion. They bought a port in Peru where major ships can pull in, including Chinese warships. This goes along the lines.
Warships.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't understand either. Chinese warships?
Chinese warships, which in other words, which it has the capability, the size, this port, to have Chinese warships, pull up. That's it right there. That port right there. So they just bought that for like $2 billion. That's one of a number of different ports that they've bought along the Pacific Rim where if they wanted to, a Chinese ship could do a port visit. Also, if we ever got into a conflict, that could be used to replenish their ships. So the Chinese, and I think President Trump's move to, hey, we need to take Panama Canal back is absolutely the right move here. Because
you do.
Absolutely. Because if the Chinese take over the Panama Canal, we are in trouble. Because they have been we know they've moved into our networks, into a Verizon network. We know that they're hacking into our systems. We know that they've pre-positioned themselves. I look at it as this way: US and US interests are the frog. We're in a lake. They've been boiling the water around us,
right?
And we're not paying attention. We have not been paying attention. Whether that's because it's the media. Either, again, I'm not saying one side, one media network or the other, but we're not paying attention to the South America, to the south of us. And the Chinese have been moving in and setting up their influence to, possibly an invasion of Taiwan. If they do an invasion of Taiwan in 27 or 28, I think those are the windows that I was told were, the windows where there's.
Who told you that?
It's on multiple different, like they have, because they need to get their systems and get their shipping, the naval up to speed, and their personnel troops. They're amassing their all their tokens, their positions, if they wanted to do an invasion. I think it's 27 or 28. I think there were a couple windows.
You'd have to wait till after Trump's out of there, because he also doesn't have to win another election at this point. And it's like, if they go in, God help them if they do that.
Right. So that's the thing, is they've got so many fingers into everything, into different positions, that the pink wave that they've been doing for 20 years. Like I said, Chile was very socialist. For a number of years. Now they've started to swing back. Argentina, obviously, with Milei, he's come back. So they've swung the Argentina back towards to the right side, and Brazil has swung left and right. Mm-hmm. So you've got a lot of these countries. Peru, socialist, went in socialist. A lot of these in 20 years ago, now they're starting to swing back. So there was recently a power failure in Chile. A power failure, I want to say it was like about 3 weeks ago. Took out 90% of the country, lost power and internet in the entire country.
90%.
90% of
Chile. Like the grids went down.
Everything went.
For how long?
I want to say it was I want to say 16, 18 hours.
Hold on, let's click that. Holy shit.
Yeah.
The 2025 Chile blackout was a major power outage that occurred on February 25th, 2025, affecting over 90% of the population of Chile and causing widespread disruptions to critical infrastructure, services, industries across the country. In response, President Gabriel Boric declared a state of emergency, imposed overnight curfew from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. on the following day. All right, let's go down to, I want to see like damage, like what about what did the death toll look like from this? Go down.
I don't think there was a death toll.
That's interesting. So it was down for the grids were down for 16 hours and we didn't see a major death toll.
I don't think so. Yeah, because I think internet. Here's the thing that made me go, wait a minute. There's something else here because the internet went down too. The power went out. Listen, you lose power, at least you get internet. You still have internet. But
how do you have the internet without power?
They lost. Well, if your cell phones.
Oh, right, because it's not okay. Yeah.
So you lost power and internet. So there was no community. My question is this. So you go back, China controls over 91% of the Chilean power grid.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
Chinese companies.
What do you mean they control it?
Chinese companies have purchased over the last 5 years. It went from like 5%, 20%, 80%. 91% of the power grid belongs to Chinese companies.
Somewhere Sean Ryan's going, I told
right?
You.
91%, right? The Chilean government has historically in the last year pushed back against Chinese influence, saying was this a Chinese blackout? Did they send a message to Chile and say, hey, listen, don't fuck with us? Did they push back against Chile? Was it, and I wrote an article about this on my Substack. I said, was this a Chinese attack on Chile saying, stop pushing back against us? Or was this a test run for a much bigger event?
So there was, I've cited this a lot before. I actually had this guy, Andy Greenberg, on the podcast a couple of times, but great author and reporter over at Wired. He wrote a book called Sandworm back in like 2018, 2019. About specifically the GRU 77445 team that does all this hacking and stuff. And one of the things that really still to this day sticks out to me, especially in light of what's happened since, is that in 2015, that team was running test runs in Kyiv, in Ukraine, to shut down their power grids. And they were able to successfully do it, which I haven't heard a lot of reporting on that type of stuff within this war. I should look into that more. But the connotation there for me was they because they were able to do it, it's like, oh, they can.
Right.
And now you're telling me that China, who all due respect to Russia, is a way bigger problem because China's worth fucking 20 times what Russia is.
Mm-hmm.
They're owning entire grids grids themselves in other sovereign nations not even close to them.
Right.
Where they could potentially literally hit a button. They don't even have to hack into it.
Right.
They own it.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying
Scary.
And that's where it's when you have 91 company, and listen, these companies are Chinese companies, but we know who is giving them their marching orders. It's correct. So if Chilean government has gotten to the position where 91% is owned by the Chinese, what's that say about other countries? So that's happened over the last 20 years.
Right.
That water has been boiling, and now it's getting to a tipping point. We see Chile. Is Peru like this? Is Colombia like this? And the fact that they own these ports on the Pacific Rim, they're pre-positioning their chess pieces in advance of if there is a conflict, whether it be a cyber war or an actual, conventional war. They're positioning their chips, all along the Pacific Rim so that they could control it in case they get into a conflict over in Taiwan. They could have a forward presence against any U.S. forces coming, to Taiwan's aid. So in it all, whether Chile was a test run to see, hey, can we shut down an infrastructure? Can we shut down internet and power? I don't know. I know that we haven't gotten a clear answer. I know that there's one story that came out. Oh, well, it was a substation in northern Chile that burned. How is one substation going to take out an entire country? So I've never heard, and again, I haven't read up on it in the last week to see whether the investigation has moved forward. Again, I don't believe having been on my side of the coin, I don't necessarily believe what is put out.
Oh, for sure.
All the time.
And it's like what's being fed through, too, because China's soft power is incredibly well done. They not even to get too stereotypical here, but like they'll finance movies in Hollywood and stuff. And then fucking John Cena's got to apologize for offending China in fucking Mandarin. You know what I mean?
You remember when Red Dawn was remade? So the movie Red Dawn was an 80s movie. And they remade that, which was a horrible remake. But
I didn't even know they did that actually.
oh, it's atrocious.
It's red. I was thinking of another one.
Atrocious remake with Liam Hemsworth. Yes, and it was a horrible remake. Well, when they filmed it, the opposing force, the OPFOR, was Chinese. They had Chinese flags.
Oh.
They went and they got such backlash before it was released. They went back and redid all the flags and removed them because Hollywood was like, "Whoa, we can't, we wouldn't be able to release this in China."
Oh my god!
Yeah, that was so. This was absolutely so. I've watched this one time and I couldn't stomach it. It was so bad. The original is awesome. The original Red Dawn is awesome, but this remake, they went back and redid all the flags to be. There you go. That's the original. Yeah. Patrick Swayze, Charlie Sheen. Yep, that was awesome.
Yeah. So and this is where you potentially could piss a lot of people off here listening, because I, like a lot of people out there, was floored. And by the way, unless you leave that article too, I want to come back to that. That's a good find you got right there. But I was floored at the waste and the corruption that you hear about through USAID. Like, you know, the stuff the guy Mike Benz has been going through. It's like,
oh, it's horrific.
It's
horrific.
It's horrific and
absolutely
bad.
Horrific.
And it's clearly like some, you know, backdoor, like for the worst parts of CIA to do stupid shit. That said, maybe not USAID, but some sort of fucking government organization like that. The one part, and this is where I pull it back to the middle, the one part where I go, all right, obviously not like this, not like we're doing it, but the one part where I'm like, something like that probably should exist.
Yes.
Not to buy fucking, you know, trans dance 100%. Shows in Venezuela, but maybe to get some actual real soft power to combat shit like this around the world. I could
Trump's
see that.
move to put whatever is USAID, whatever's like, put it in the State Department under Rubio, I think is the absolute best. Is awesome decision.
Interesting.
100%. I think it's you need absolutely what you're saying. There needs to be a focus. It doesn't mean an organization which is just literally, and that's literally what it was created was, and they're just putting out blank checks to all these horrible things that they do. Crazy things. I mean,
they
just
were
like
buying like $10,000 worth of stuff too.
Crazy.
Like, what does that even do?
Why are you supporting a play in in Guatemala for, you know, trans, you know, people who are trans? And listen, you do you. You be you. I don't care. But why am I paying for that? Right. It's just absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
I think that there needs to be, because the Chinese have been doing this, the Belt and Road, there needs to be an element of that here, because we can't just not do something. There has to be, but having it under the State Department in Rubio, I think that's absolutely the right move, and say, listen, something's broken here. Okay. Clearly this is not working, because it's, you know, we're spending, USAID was just, money was just going out everywhere. Okay. Let's stop that. Let's rebuild it, and let's make it more streamlined, smaller, faster, you know, whatever, $6 million man type of thing. So let's just make it smarter and faster, and let's make sure it's directed towards things that help us, help this country and our interest overseas. USAID was you know, complete disaster.
Yeah, the setup's just
it's horrible.
So it's nice that it's come out. I'm very happy that's all coming out. So maybe they can set it up like that. That could be cool.
Agreed.
But Alessi had pulled up this article. This is based on what you were talking about, but to a whole nother level. What does that title say? China blasts spineless plan to sell Panama Canal ports to BlackRock. God, it's like watching the Cowboys and the Giants play
I haven't
each
seen
other.
this. Whoa. Listen,
I'm rooting for the asteroid.
Whoa! I mean, come on.
BlackRock.
I have been a
China.
Giants fan since I was like a
I'm
little
an
bit.
Eagles guy. Sorry.
No, listen. You know what? And here's the thing: is I was rooting. I did not want to see either team win the Super Bowl this year because I'm a Giants fan.
You were rooting for the asteroid.
No, I was rooting for Saquon.
Lamar?
I wanted Saquon.
Oh, okay. All right. So you were rooting for us.
I wanted Saquon to win the trophy. That's the ultimate when I came down to.
So you were rooting for us. Thank you.
No, on the record here, I am not supporting the Eagles. On the record, Giants, Yankees, Rangers.
Okay. Well, basically, for me, this would be like the Cowboys playing the Giants right here, where we're talking about China and BlackRock. But
yes.
All right, so China has sharply criticized a proposal to sell ports in the Panama Canal to American asset management giant BlackRock, attacking the deal as spineless, groveling, and a betrayal of the Chinese people. A commentary published by the state-owned Ta Kung Pao. You know what? I'm not going to make a joke right there because we're going to.
We could just leave that one alone.
Newspaper and reposted on the website of China's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office on Thursday sent shares in CK Hutchinson, the Hong Kong-based owner of the ports, plummeting by more than 6% on Friday. Observers say it was a sign that some investors are concerned the deal may not ultimately go through if Beijing objects. I'm not aware of any approval from Chinese regulators is required given CKH is retaining all of its existing Chinese ports. Of course, there is some chance the other influences may be brought to bear on the company that might put the deal at risk. The market seems to be pricing in some chance of this. So last week, a group of investors led by BlackRock said it would spend $22.8 billion, which, it's like a Tuesday for them, to buy the ports of Balboa and Cristobal on either end of the canal from CK Hutchinson. The consortium also agreed to buy CK Hutchinson's controlling interest in 43 other ports comprising 199 berths in 23 countries. They said the deal is agreement in principle. I think this is, because this is BlackRock, this is the USAID right here. This is the US using BlackRock as USAID. That's what this smells like to me.
Yeah. When was this article posted?
March 14th, 2025.
So yesterday.
Recently. Yeah.
2 days ago. Yeah, I hadn't seen this.
That's interesting.
But don't tell me, this is a yeah, I think that I think that if BlackRock is behind this, I think President Trump is, supporting it, for them to make the purchase.
So Trump's in bed with BlackRock.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm sure that President Trump is. Listen, this is more beneficial than actually putting troops on the ground in Panama, which I am also supportive of.
You're supportive of putting troops on the ground in Panama?
If it gets to that point, yes.
To stop China?
Yes, I would be supportive.
China doesn't have troops on the ground there, right? They just bought the ports, so they have people there, but they don't have do they?
Listen, I don't know, but
I don't like that look.
Listen, I would not be surprised if there's Chinese units in the embassy right there. I would not be surprised. Element members.
How many guys we talking?
How many do you need?
I don't know.
A SEAL team 6, 4-man element is, they could take on, a huge guy. I mean, listen, I'll let Sean, speak to that because I don't know, but I'll tell you what, like I said, I would not be surprised. And again, I do not know this, but I would not be surprised to see if there was Chinese troops already in Panama, maybe stuck up in a hotel or something, ready to go to take over the port if needed. Like, in other words, if they saw the threat to the port. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying is, again, I would not be opposed to U.S. troops being deployed there. Now, I would hope that it would be in cooperation with the Panamanian government saying, hey, we're going to send the 10th Mountain. We're going to send the 10th Mountain there to help you guys
okay
out.
With that?
You guys to help you guys out. No, we're going to do this. So you're going to cooperate, right? Of course you are. So I hope that would have to. But we cannot let the Panama Canal fall into the Chinese hands.
I don't disagree with that. That would be a huge. I mean, locationally, it's the crossroads.
Yeah. So
that would be a huge problem. It's just people get nervous about what that could blow up into.
Of course it would. I mean, let's put it this way. There's, invading Greenland, invading Canada. I don't think we need to be doing that. I don't think we need to be invading Greenland or Canada, become the 51st and the 52nd states. But, Panama Canal, and I'm saying this, I don't want violence. I don't want encounters. I don't want there to be, contact between military units. That's the last thing I want. I don't want war. But looking at what China has done over the last 20 years with the Pink Lake, China Lake, and the Pink Wave, listen, they've already got their chips in our position.
Yeah.
So we need to protect ourselves. And I'm sure President Trump would rather let BlackRock buy these ports so that BlackRock controls them. Now, whether he is in bed with BlackRock, I don't know. I have no idea.
There's a lot of people sweating out there right now hearing you talk. They're like, wait a minute.
I couldn't even begin to speak I'm just basing, listen, I'm seeing this article for the first time right now. So
that's interesting.
It's interesting because if you see a lot of other, a lot of companies, I mean, since the Trump administration, Apple invested $500 billion into the United States after the inauguration. Apple made a $500 billion investment into build, I assume, would be factories and, Apple assets here in the United States.
That's good,
so
I think.
if you had asked me a year ago, would Apple be, investing into the United States and supporting, being at the inauguration, you had Tim Cook and Zuckerberg.
Oh, they were all
right.
there.
They were all there. So they clearly are.
They flipped the switch real fast.
So
what's that look?
Hey, listen.
What's that look?
They know the winning team. They see the winning team, and they're like, hey, this is good for business. Maybe BlackRock, they see what's good for business, and BlackRock has an opportunity to control these ports.
Yeah.
Hey.
You're saying a lot of quiet parts out loud today. I appreciate that about you. That's good. But did you remember the case, because you kind of mentioned it, where when you were talking about all this China investment, how they're doing some here too, obviously. Like we talked about the farmland and stuff before. That's weird. I want to get to them with the border as well, because that's in your territory. But you remember the Huawei thing too? Where they were
phones?
where they were buying up the cell towers and stuff.
Yeah.
Did you have any look through on any of those cases?
No.
Yeah, that wasn't.
No.
That's totally out of your.
Listen, I
purview,
understand
right?
all this Chinese thing. All right, I speak from a position of because I am by heritage South American, so I know about the pink wave. I've been studying it. I've been reading about it, and I know these things. Did I do any criminal investigations? No, I didn't do anything. That wasn't my wheelhouse. There are other agents who did that. I'm sure there's departments in counterintelligence, and they did this work. So, and I'm sure the agency was all over this. But we know that it's publicly known that that the Chinese hackers hacked into the Verizon networks. They've hacked into our Verizon networks. They've gone into the systems, and they've gone into our. I don't know how deep it went, but they were in our cell phones. So
They were in all of our cell phones?
Again, this is just based on the.
I'm on AT&T. Joke's on you guys, but still.
I know they were in multiple networks, and I think there was a discussion that they were also inside the system that's utilized to conduct wiretaps in the United States. Law enforcement were able to, the systems we've built to conduct wiretaps. And that was, again, based on what I read in the media, but the Chinese were inside the telephone systems. Listen, listen, the amount of hacks that are being done out there, that are, groups like Scattered Spider, which is the #1 cyber hacking team, elements here in the United States, they hacked in Las Vegas. The Scattered Spider team allegedly attacked MGM Grand. The MGM, and took them. They lost after it took them the MGM to counteract the attack. They lost $150 million. So yeah, there you go, Scattered Spider, and they're elite. I mean, these are the guys.
Can you hit that Wikipedia? Let's see what the CIA has to say about this. All right, Scattered Spider, also referred to as UNC 3944, is a hacking group mostly made up of teen and young adults, believed to be primarily made up of operators based in the United States and the United Kingdom. The group gained notoriety for their involvement in the hacking and extortion of Caesars Entertainment and MGM Resorts. Scattered Spiders has also targeted Visa, PNC Financial, Transamerica, New York Life, Synchrony Financial, and Truist Bank and Twilio. Most recently, members of Scattered Spider have been connected to hacks against Snowflake customers. Okay.
Never heard that. So they attacked Caesars and MGM resorts at the same time. Caesars, and they inserted a malware into the system. And Caesars, and they asked them, they said $15 million and we'll release your system. Caesars said, here you go. They paid him the $15 million ransom. MGM said no. They ended up losing $150 million. Yeah.
You got to make that investment early, man.
Right. So, and it's crazy how they got in. And what they did was they studied. So you never attack, a cyber attack is never attacking directly at it's always an end around. They targeted an individual that works at MGM. They studied that person. They found out everything they knew about the person. And eventually when they were ready to strike, what they did is they called IT support at MGM and said, hey, this is whatever. My name is Anthony. How you doing? I just lost my password. Can you reset it, please? Sure. What's your dog's name? What's your month? Things that they had already identified. And this was a U.S. American individual pretending to be. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Here's your reset password. Just enter this. He entered it. Boom. They were in. He reset the password for this employee. Was able to enter, and they inserted the malware. And that's how they got in. Simple. That simple. There's another scam one of my clients told me about, and this was, it wasn't a scam. It was a robbery. So, and it was social engineering. So he was on a plane. He was landing in Miami. Got off the plane, and you know how when you're logging in, it says, please enter this 6-digit code that we'll send to your email. And he got a list, boom, 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 boom. Google code, Facebook code, boom, 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 multiple different ones. And each one of them, so immediately he thought, he's like, I'm being attacked. One of them was for his crypto bank, but multiple other Google this, Facebook that, but nothing else happened. So it looked like he was like, okay, someone's attacking me, but they weren't able to get in any of the systems. The crypto company called him and said, hey, sir, we see some suspicious activity. Is this you? And based upon what had just happened to him, he goes, yeah, I saw the same thing. He's like, okay, well, let's lock it down. Let's put 2-person identity. Let's answer these questions. And it was the hackers. He lost $800,000 in crypto in one shot. He didn't know.
Yeah, so
it was social engineering. They had set him up. They had left hook, and all of a sudden he just came in with a right hook, and they took him for $800,000. So that's, for me, it was a robbery. It wasn't a scam. They targeted him. So these guys know what they're doing, and I mean, that's not the only one I've heard of. So, yeah, these guys are good. These guys are very good, and they've teamed up supposedly with I don't know if it was the Vegas, but supposedly they teamed up with Black Hat, which is a Russian hacking unit. So the Scattered Spiders, how I understood it, were all young guys. They're all young American, know how to get into the system. Black Hat are Russian. It's a Russian hacking unit who have the knowledge of how to hack a system, of like how to make how to conduct an attack. Right. So the experience of the young kids in the United States and Black Hat and Russian, the working together, I mean, it's some of the, the most elitist groups out there. They're joining forces now.
That's crazy.
I know, exactly. So, but I think MGM lost about $150 million that day.
And now with AI, we were talking off camera before we got started. Like, there's so many. It's getting so good that you could be vulnerable at any one moment because you could be what was the one story you told me? The guy thought he was like going into a meeting. It was all real people, but they were all AI.
So it was in I believe in Hong Kong, where
a bad start.
an individual who was in the finance unit element for a company, he gets called into a meeting, and he sits down and he's in front of a television, and the board there is the finance board, and there's a board of members there. And they tell him, they're like, okay, we need you to transfer $25 million. He's like, okay, because you're telling me you're the CFO, you're the boss. Well, it turns out he was talking to a room full of AI.
Oh my God.
25 million. And that's not the only story I've heard of AI scams where they're just, you're talking to. And now with the type of voice, all AI systems that are out there, it takes 2 to 3 seconds, I believe it is, on like a social media. All they do, I mean, this conversation right now, it's going to be posted like the other podcasts I've did. So somebody could take my voice and pretend to be me, and my mom would be convinced.
Yeah, it's getting really scary.
Yeah,
how much better it's getting every single day. Like when it first started, it's like, all right, if you really look, you can tell. Now, some of it you really got to be looking. Well, might not be able to tell.
What's tough for law enforcement these days? And I was talking to your producer, before the cameras went on, is that the bureaucracy and the difficultness to purchase a system for law enforcement purposes. Okay, so you in the private industry creates the next advanced computer to hack a system like this. In law enforcement, that's the next advanced computer. You're ahead of me. You're already ahead of me. You get the new one, and I want to get that. But to be able to get that system so we could counter battle each other and we could fight the hack, I have to go through systems and tests and this. Yeah. By the time I have that computer, you've already moved on to the next one.
That's right.
So I'm already a step behind you. So that's the hurdles that law enforcement has to go over, is that they're constantly chasing the criminals who are ahead of the game and have the next technology, whereas law enforcement has to go through, hey, we got to test it. How much we got to pay for it? What are the bids? It's just
That world moves so fast, you can't do it. You can't do it like that.
No, I mean, hell, I mean, you just as a consumer now these days, you buy a car, you buy a laptop. In a week from now, it's already outdated.
It's obsolete.
It's obsolete.
Right. Yeah.
And it's already moved on. So they're already moving on. AI's growth is, exponential.
Oh, it's insane.
I mean, it's insane. It's growing upon itself. And some of the stuff you see online, and we know that there was I think it was Belarus. There was an election that was controlled, or I want to say it was in Belarus. I think it was the country. There was an election, and about 2 days before the election, an audio tape was released where you supposedly hear the individual, the politician, his voice saying, "Oh yeah, no, I've rigged previous elections," and I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah.
"I've rigged previous elections. Don't worry about it. This will be fine." 2 days later, he ends up losing the election.
I also wonder if it's going to get so rampant that no one's going to believe anything they do here that's real. Like let's say someone had really said something like that, and people just go, it's just AI.
Correct.
It works both ways. It's
Correct.
crazy.
100%. Could be the defense, and that may be the actual person to saying, having said that, but their defense could be, no, that's fake. Even if it's caught on video.
Right.
You're like, no, that's not me.
It's AI.
That's AI.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm wrong. So it absolutely goes both ways.
Did you guys at FBI, because again, you didn't leave there that long ago, did you do any, maybe not simulations, but did you guys have like imagination teams? I'm making up a term there, but here's what I mean by that. Teams whose job it was their task was to try to determine what future warfare could look like with hypothetical enemies, and if that happened, not only what it would look like, but what FBI's role might be in that type of scenario?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't know for a fact but if there wasn't that type of office or that team, I'd be very upset. If there wasn't a group of...
If
there was not.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know for a fact, because that was my pipeline was gangs. And that's all
You didn't get right into that part of the deep state.
Nope.
Yeah.
I didn't need to know. I don't need to know. And I was in the gang world, and that's all I need to know. And listen, I had top secret SCI clearance, but there was never my world.
Your world didn't cross with that.
Didn't cross with that.
But your world, like.
But I'd be shocked and very disappointed if there wasn't an office of analysts. I don't think the agents, maybe one agent that would be involved in that, but I'd be shocked and surprised if there wasn't a group of people that are thinking exactly that.
For sure.
Going, okay, let's think outside the box. I mean,
Yes.
And that was the failure of 9/11, is that they didn't think outside the box.
Well, also they didn't communicate.
And communication,
with CIA,
but that goes to thinking outside the box. Yeah. Let's not think outside the box. As an investigative period, yeah, that was a failure. But as to not think outside the box, and so, okay, let's think about what could the cartels launch an attack? How would they do that? But listen, they do it in the military. We know that they do it in the military. Hey, if we want to invade Taiwan, if we wanted to invade China, I'm sure there are tons of different scenarios. If we get attacked by cyber, what is going to be our response? If there's an attack from satellite, space attacks, because I believe some countries have weapons up in space.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm sure there is. I mean, I'd be ignorant not to think that that's probable up there. But to think exactly, different scenarios and how we're going to respond. I would hope that there's an office in the FBI doing that.
Okay. Well, within your gang investigations, because you brought up the China thing, that's why my tentacles were going off a little bit. We'll get to the cartels in a minute, but did you see Chinese involvement in any of these gangs, or not even involvement, but like peripheral type actions that might line up?
Not in the gangs, but based on what I've read, when I read is, the Chinese influence into, methamphetamines and fentanyl distribution. Yeah, they work with. From what I understand, they're working with the cartels is because So I can't say for certain. I mean, I never saw it in the gang world.
Yeah.
I never saw it in the gang world.
I mean, it's a reverse opium war. And Ed was talking a lot about that too off camera, and I think on camera as well at Calderon. And we've had all the cartel people we've had in talk about that. And it's like it's so crazy how accessible they've made it. I've told this story before on the podcast, but this dude, Ben Westhoff, who I've been talking with, we'll get him in here at some point. He wrote this book called Fentanyl Inc., maybe like 6-7 years ago, something like that. And he had done a Joe Rogan podcast back in the day that really opened my eyes, where he explained how he even fell into this story. So he was like a culture reporter, wrote about music, movies and stuff like that. And he's doing some random story in the music industry. And somewhere in the story, like, he's interviewing some guy, and the guy mentions an offhand comment about fentanyl. And he had heard of it, but he started asking the guy more. And they got really curious because he was like, whoa, got surprised. And so ends up going down this rabbit hole, writing this book called Fentanyl Inc. While he's writing the book, just a regular author, did something pretty savage. He's like, well, fuck it. I'll go to China. Flies to China. He's like, let's see how easily I could get this. And he gets into a lab, and they're like, all right, so do you want the deluxe special or the supreme? And he's like, holy shit. And so that's just a regular citizen going over there to do it. But these guys, you mentioned all the resources they're putting into South America and everything.
Well, I mean, you got this port in Peru. They're controlling this port right now. You could literally have a ship full of fentanyl, just drive right up to Peru and say, all right, boys, here we go. We got carrot, we got by the case, by the tonnage. What do you want? And that's distribution straight up in the vein into the United States, from Peru to Central America into Mexico. I mean, it's a port that they control now, which, like I said, theoretically is the docks are big enough to, have Chinese warships.
Yeah.
I mean,
crazy.
1-1.
What's your take on, within your career, dealing with these groups and how they were able to get here? Like, was it strictly due to a border problem, or was it deeper than that?
Oh, TDA is 100% border problem.
Okay.
100%.
So they just ripped through the border.
This would not, TDA problem we have today, I 100% put it on Biden's administration because of the open border policy, of how many millions came across during his 4 years. TDA came to creation, I think it was in 2018 is when they were created, but they really, but they started cutting their teeth in Chile and South America and Peru, but they really didn't start coming to the United States until 23 at the earliest. When I went to that meeting in South America, where they were talking about that they were a little bit into Texas and South Florida, okay, and that was in spring of 23. 1 year later, we're talking about this spread across this country. What is it, 16, 19 different states there's TDA presence? That doesn't happen normally. I've seen, firsthand how a gang, how a transnational criminal organization, expands their presence. If we had, what would you call it? Not obviously not today where there's zero, border crossings, but if you would say pre-Biden, pre-2020, during the Trump administration or Bush or Obama or anything, where there was thousands, there was people coming across, even that, there never would have been the amount of TDA members that there are now. That happened in the 4 years during the Biden administration, 100%. That happened not naturally. It spread so quickly because they were able to come across the border. Now, you understand is, okay, there are millions of people that came across the border.
Yes.
Right.
That we know of, that kind of know of.
Correct. It was an estimate. Right. Be very clear. 90% of those people that came across the border are good people.
For sure.
Just looking for a better opportunity to work here. Now, they committed a crime entering the country. There's no doubt about that. They illegally, immigrated into the United States.
I know what you're saying.
Right. But for me, it's the 10%. It's the 10% of 15 million.
It's called a Trojan horse.
Right. So you have not just Hispanic or not TDA, not just cartel. You have Chinese, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas. They all came in with a wide open door. So you have that element. And that's what, Holman is going after. And I fully applaud them. I mean, they're working their butts off. And I've talked to a couple of guys who they're like, yeah, we're working 6 days a week, constantly. But they're never going to, it's just so much.
You can't swat every fly.
They're not going to get them. I mean, they're going to try and get them, but we just don't have the manpower to keep up with that speed. So, I've heard stories that, that there's Eric Prince has put in for a contract, for $25 billion
yes, I saw that.
to start up, the whole private industry, I'll
The we gonna find you industry.
right, exactly. So there's got to be a solution here. There's got to be a solution. But that element, that's that 10% that came in during the 4 years. That's how TDA grew so fast.
What at FBI, you know, you guys are working cases, whether it be you or other agents working different types of things that somehow, some way touch the border or touch
Right.
things that happen as it relates to the border. What were you guys saying and thinking while this just got so out
Absolutely
of control?
insane. Absolutely insane. I would talk to deportation officers that were on the border. They would talk to them, and I knew them, and they would tell me they were like, yeah, we just, people would just come up, go, I'm claiming asylum. It's not even like the traditional.
Sounds good. Go ahead, right there.
And that's pretty much what it is. They take a note. They'd be like, here's, where are you going to go? I'm going to go to Elizabeth, New Jersey. Okay. All right. You're going to Elizabeth, New Jersey. Name, fingerprint. I think they took one fingerprint and they just said, okay, here's a court date, report in 9 years.
In 9 years.
Oh yeah. An OTA, which is an order to appear. There was so much backlog. You'd be looking at 6 to 9 years. And that person was expected to show up in court, whatever it was, 9 years from now.
Well, all right, so let's bring this back around on some Ed was talking about. Now you've declared cartel organizations terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
Can any Mexican now claim asylum?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I wouldn't know the State Department rules, but yeah, if somebody wanted to come across and they said, listen, if they have, so a lot of El Salvadorians would come to this country saying, I'm being pursued by MS-13 and I fear for my safety. And so to be able to claim asylum, I believe someone had to display to the court that their life was in danger being in that original country. So whether, I think rules were different for like Cubans and in other countries and Venezuelans where it's a hostile government and that people fear for their lives. And I think it's the same thing for like MS-13. A lot of El Salvadorians would come to this country going, I fear for my life.
Yeah.
If I get sent back, I would die. And then that's what the judge would make a decision upon. They had to prove to the court that if they were sent back, they would die. And that's
how
how
you even prove that, though?
I don't know. I guess you have to show documentation via your attorney. And
that's a tough spot for judges to be in.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, I'm not jealous of that. That's a really tough spot.
Because you're making, and I know countless times where people have argued, that they would die if they were sent back. And I know a lot of hardcore gang members, people that are tatted up, that would be like, if I get sent back, I'll get killed by my own gang.
Oh, by my own gang.
Yeah.
Now that's where I'm like, well, that's your problem, buddy.
Thinning of the herd.
Yeah. All right. So you were saying though, I was asking you about what FBI thought of this, and they were thinking it was insane.
It was absolutely in the street agent perspective.
Yeah.
It was absolutely. I just sit there and there were like thousands, and this was during the Biden administration and before.
Yeah.
There's just the number of people that were coming across the border, and all they were doing is just sign. All right, have a nice day. Have a nice day. Welcome to the United States. Welcome to the United States. Welcome to the United States. And it was just absolutely insane.
Did you have ways to get intel through working with some of these other countries, crime fighting organizations to know guys before they came here?
Not knowingly, no. I never got intelligence. So I worked with El Salvador. So in a lot of these countries, we have FBI agents. So I know there were in El Salvador. There's a unit. There are 2 agents now, 3 agents that are in El Salvador, and their job. Well, here's the thing: is their job is not to do investigations. Their job is to create the liaison between the El Salvadorian law enforcement and the U.S. law enforcement.
Got it.
So there are elements in El Salvadorian law enforcement that they conduct the investigations down there, and they just bring the two together. And I know for a fact that there would be our FBI counterparts in El Salvador. I worked with them all the time. In the Salvadorian government, I would work with them all the time. And they would be running wiretaps, and they would pass intelligence on to us, and we would I interceded in a couple incidents that were here in the United States where they caught something on a wiretap down in El Salvador They notified their counterpart, and counterpart literally would call me directly at like 1 a.m. Said, "Hey, this is about to happen."
Right.
And I zipped out and I stopped the shooting at one point.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you stop? Like, would
Well,
you hold up your badge and say, "Everyone clear out"?
No. So I was, like I said, some of my best friends were local law enforcement, and we had gotten word that there may be a shooting here in New Jersey that was being planned by MS-13. So we were kind of like on a standby, and I had already contacted these 2 law enforcement agencies and said, "Hey, just to give you a heads up, coordinate. Hey, who should I call? Who could I coordinate with? We want to give you a heads up. If I get the intelligence, I'm going to contact you guys directly."
Right.
And it came in, and it actually did occur. It was in the process. So I literally was, jumped in my car to get to the scene, but I was already on the phone with the local law enforcement saying, "Hey, it's about to happen. I need you guys, and then they set up, in the area of the shooting. These guys were supposedly going to shoot out the windows of a restaurant because that person wasn't paying extortion dues. So they were sending a signal to the restaurant owner saying, and they were going to shoot out the windows. I contacted local law enforcement. They were able to set up in the area while I was en route, and I literally was like a few minutes away, and they were already interceding with a young kid.
With a young kid?
15 years old, I believe it was. 15 years old.
Jesus Christ.
I believe he was ended up getting deported. This was 2015, 2016.
This wasn't in Hoboken, was it?
No.
All right, that's good.
No, it wasn't Hoboken.
All right.
But yeah, so we were able to. So for me, like I said, my best friends, my best relationships were with local law enforcement, state and local in New Jersey. Here, I worked great with them. So I could not do my job without them.
But if you basically, though, because you couldn't really get any hard data in many cases from the border, because not everyone's stopping by and filling out their fingerprint and whatever, you're constantly just seeing dudes pop up and you're like, oh, I wonder how he got here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, all the time. There was guys, I mean, you've seen it in the news now. I mean, There's guys that were arrested here recently in these latest roundups in the last month that I'm like, wait a minute.
I know him.
He was supposed to have left the country. He left the country 2 years ago, and all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, look at you. You're back in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no. It happens all the time. There's guys that were, multiple times, deported and would either attempt to cross. And I would do that often. I would say, I've had somebody who would be deported, and I'd put an alert. So I'd get flagged if he ever recrossed the border or if he got captured crossing the border. And I had a couple incidents like that where they, MS-13 members would come across the border, they get captured. Hey, we got this guy down here at the border. You want us to you want us to talk to him? And I would say, yes, interview him, see if he's willing to talk. And then they would interview him, probably nothing. And then he'd just get deported. He'd get thrown back out. There were opportunities to charge somebody federally for multiple reentries. And then I believe you could serve up to a maximum of 1 day short of a year, so 364 days.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an option some U.S. attorneys could use as a leveraging tool for them to talk. If not, they were just deported back.
Mm. Now, did you? I guess Trend Aragua popped up so late in your career that there probably wouldn't have been time for this. But maybe with MS-13, did you flip guys who went undercover for you with them?
Yeah, I would have. So the careful word is undercover. So undercover is an agent.
I'm sorry.
Right, so
I don't mean it that way. I mean
right.
an informant that would wear a wire.
Oh yeah, no, I had informants that wore wires for me. Yes,
who were purported to or literally were in MS-13.
Yes. No, we did that. It was quite often.
Wow.
Oh yeah. No, we would in whatever way I would find somebody who was, willing to work with me, whether, I build a relationship, and that's where being able to speak the language. You're never going to get that relationship.
But it was always because you caught them doing something else, obviously.
Not necessarily.
No. So sometimes all right. So
sometimes it's just developing the relationship that they're like, hey, you know what? I want to do the right thing.
Whoa.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes including someone who's here illegally.
Yes.
How would you do that?
Well, a lot of times, believe it or not, it's when they get into a relationship with somebody and have a kid. They're just like, you know what? I don't want to have that gang life anymore. But since they're here illegally, I target them, I would interview them, I talk to them, and it's always when they have children that they're just like, maybe I shouldn't be a gang member anymore, or I have a reason to stay here in the country. So it's not necessarily always, having a criminal past. Most of the times it was, but there was a couple times where it's just somebody who was either did serve time and now wants to stay here, or someone that I just was able to, develop because I knew that they didn't want that gang life anymore. But, I knew that it was like, hey, the whole point of saying, listen, you want to stay here in the country, you have to earn it. We're not just going to give you, temporary visa here just because, we feel like it.
Right. It's kind of crazy.
You have to earn it.
They're a member. They're changing their mind now. That's great. I'm happy for them. But they're a member of this extremely violent gang.
Yeah.
And not from here. And yet they might in the future be a citizen. It's
Right.
the question was going to be MS-13 is viewed as the blood, guts, and gore one. You
Yeah.
know, they're the ones that are bodies in the street and stuff. It's obviously some of these guys still somehow have some humanity, I guess. Deep in there a little bit.
There is a percentage.
Not all of them.
Not all.
I mean,
there's some 40, 50, 60-year-old guys who are just you'd be like, they're members. They're
Right.
but those are the guys who are Mexican mafia members, Black Hand. Those are the guys that are for life. And then you have your small percentage, of guys who are just, they were doing that when they were 16, 17, 18-year-old because they didn't have any other opportunities. They just wanted to be a gang member. They wanted to do shootings. They wanted to be part of a larger organization. And once they meet somebody, maybe when they're 22, 23, 24 years old, they haven't been caught so far. Or they haven't done something completely horrible like a butchering or a murder, because those people are just out there.
Yeah.
So this is just, it's finding that middle ground of somebody who's not a butcher and someone who is not like a young
Right.
kid. It's finding that person. And then that's the informant. Not everyone is an informant. Not everyone's going to flip.
For sure.
So it's finding that middle ground.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
But I think about this a lot, with anything, your environment and where you grow up and who you grow up around, or
Right.
what your home is like, and, who the people you gravitate towards are. I had a guy sitting in your seat a few weeks ago, Red Shea, who, at a very young age was the number 4 guy under Whitey Bulger at one point. He's the only one that never ratted. Did his full prison sentence, the whole bit, and he reminds everyone they never ratted. But, you hear about his childhood and, the type of situation he grew up in, and no dad in the house and no money, and some certainly very interesting relationships, dynamics with his sisters. And then, the way the streets were, and how he was a prize fighter who his fucking boxing trainer recruited him into being a fucking cocaine distributor.
Wow.
And I keep looking at this. I'm like, how the fuck would I would have ended up the same way?
Right.
And so looking at these MS-13 guys, where many of them grow up in some of these other countries in abject poverty, and maybe their father died because he was in it too or whatever, and then they're pulled in at 8, 9, 10, by these father figure type people, cool guys wearing tattoos who have some
Right.
power and a little bit of money.
Yep.
And then they go along the way, but maybe there's that moment, like you said, they have a kid or something like that, and it's almost like they come to,
Right.
and they're maybe what I'm getting at is maybe some of these guys, most of them are, it just is what it is. They're violent gang members, but some of them maybe actually aren't that guy.
Correct.
And that's what you were looking for.
Yep. I was actually looking for that one person who, and not every single time, these people that, see the other, and you were talking about this guy who just, in Bulger's team who didn't flip, and it's say, okay, and you're not going to find it. So, but it's just poking, poking, keep finding, and then until you find that boop, and then you find that person, and then you work them. I had lots of informants who worked for me who never created a big case, but they were just giving me intelligence. And it's just, listening, turning over rocks. That's all I did, was turning over rocks and listening to intelligence and what's happening here in New Jersey, and then eventually both internationally. And it's just listening for intelligence, listening for learning. And then eventually, if enough showed up, there was probable cause to open up an investigation, then I would open up the investigation into whatever it be, MS-13 in Union City or MS-13 in Plainfield, or somewhere else. There were a couple strongholds here in New Jersey.
For sure. All right, so trend to Aragua, now it's like in the news, and they're declared a terrorist organization. Because it's different than the cartels. Like, what are the next steps there? If they're so tied in with Maduro too, that kind of makes it a little weird. No.
Yeah, I think it's utilizing is having the communication and working with other federal agencies to listen, and it's let FBI and HSI work their RICO investigations, their large scale racketeering investigations. Let them do that, but yet at the same time keep an ear out for intelligence that whether it goes back to Venezuela or Mexico or something along the lines, because there's influence there. There's TDA, communication in all these countries. So it's keeping an ear out and having the open line of communication to make sure that we're thinking outside the box and saying, listen, let's not let TDA get to that point. We could definitely dismantle TDA. We definitely could cause enough problems. But just like MS-13, so it's never going to go away.
Yeah,
it's never going to go away. We took out MS-13 in Plainfield in 2013. And this is why RICO works. In 2013, Plainfield Local Salvatrucha was a PLS, was a crew in Plainfield, doing homicides, drug dealing, all of that. Took them to trial. They've never recovered. They never recovered. Plainfield Local Salvatrucha never recovered. Now, there are two other cliques from what I understand is they're in Plainfield, but that's two other cliques. Right. PLS never recovered from that. And there are still members that are PLS, but they never got back to their power. So that's proof, right? That's proof that it works. So that's how you dismantle an organization. Letting federal authorities, do these RICO investigations, work these cases, and get into the root of the evil. That's how we're going to do it. Getting these temporary these ICE deportations. I don't know if that's that's a temporary fix, but hopefully we'll get into it. But talking what you talk about, working with Maduro, that's how it's going to be. Working with interagency cooperation and making sure that intelligence flows in two directions.
What are their financial networks like? Are they like utilizing a lot of crypto? Like how do they launder money throughout the United States?
That is two things. One, if I knew how they do it, I wouldn't comment on it because anything that I comment on is I wouldn't want to, expose any federal investigations. So in other words, because if whatever I say here, obviously I assume the bad guys are going to hear it. So for example, I've seen vehicles driving around Bozeman, which I can look at and I can identify and going, okay, that's a cartel member.
They drive Toyotas.
No. No, it's not that easy. But I know
she's got a Prius.
Because who knows? I don't want to all of a sudden now they hear it and they're going to let's change that up.
Yeah.
So from what I understand, yes, they're in crypto. They are money laundering, and obviously they know that they're owning the gold mines in Venezuela. From what I understand, they're taking the gold, they're selling it in the United States and in Europe, and then returning those funds back into their operations. They are doing the crypto, they're doing the money laundering. How they're doing it, I personally don't know. Like I said, that would be a deep investigation, and that actually was after my time. So I wouldn't even begin to know how they're doing the money laundering. But they are doing it. I mean, that's not a secret.
Leaving in 2023, obviously you had been in the military for 9 years and then 20 years in FBI. So it's a long career, and I would imagine it's pretty exhausting work, time to go. But is there a party that's also like something like that's coming on the table, hardcore? You're a high up kind of guy working this where you're like, fuck, should I leave right now?
Yeah. No, it was the work. I loved it, and I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave because of the work.
Your wife didn't.
She 100%. Christine is an absolute rock star. She was going to support me either decision I made.
That's good.
She's brilliant. She worked in Manhattan in New York City for 16 years for a family fund, family office. She worked for them for like 16 years. She's brilliant. She became head of trading operations in charge of like $10 billion. So she's like, I'm like way overshot my shot here. So she's totally out of my league. Some reason she said yes to me. We have our kids now. So, and that's why I started our company with her, and she is the CEO. So I'm the CEO.
Oh, you report to her.
I 100% report to her.
Tough.
I know. Well, we are female, small-owned business. So just in case any day we want to go to the government for a contract, small-owned business, small female-owned business. So, but no, she's brilliant. So she was. But I left the bureau. My main motivating factor was like, listen, there's two things that influenced me to leave the bureau. One, 29 years in the government. So I knew my pension was pretty good. So if I stayed on 50, 51, 52, I wasn't going to make that much more money to get the pension so much higher.
Right.
I'm marketable at 50 years old. So what I can earn in the private sector plus my pension will be so much more than what I would get paid in the government. Right. So I was like, okay, that's be my number one reason. Number two was I was so exhausted of what we talked about earlier, of fighting with the upper management. So tired of fighting with, whether it be an ASAC, which is an assistant special agent in charge, fighting with them or fighting with somebody and just trying to get the job done and, trying to do things. And it was, so I know of a story that happened recently, and this was a great example. And it was there are 56 divisions in this country, right? FBI divisions, correct. So there's divisions in most states, but some states, their home office covers multiple states. For example, Montana doesn't have a division. Right. Salt Lake City covers it. Mm-hmm. But in a lot of states here in the Northeast, there's maybe multiple divisions in one state. Pennsylvania has 2 divisions, I think. New York has 3. Buffalo, Albany, New York. So it all depends on the state. I know that there's 2 states where the story is there was a fugitive in one state, okay? The neighboring state had the case. It was a murder investigation, and they were supporting local law enforcement. They had a fugitive. They have a warrant out for this fugitive. He was a Trinitario. So he was across the border line in another state, but yet, they were running the investigation, in where he committed the murder. Mm-hmm. The neighboring state didn't allow them to do the SWAT hit to arrest it because they wanted the glory. Oh, so you had an ASAC in this neighboring state going, no, we're going to do this. But you're the case team. Yeah, you can be the case, but we're going to do the hit. We want the press. Is that really what it's get down to? That's what it gets down to. Fortunately, the case team did the hit. They got the arrest. They got because they did the work. They were doing the work for years. So it's that exactly what you just did. Roll your eyes, going, that exhaustion.
ASAC, more like ball sack.
It wasn't right. Yeah. It wasn't worth it. So it was exhausted. So when Christine and I decided in 2019 that I was going to retire in 2023. So we knew for years that I was out in 2023. So that's why we purchased our house in Montana back in 2020. So that we would, I'm out.
Oh wow, you bought it all the way back then.
Yeah. No, we bought years ago, knowing that I was going to retire. So there was no maybe I'll stick around. It was I knew I was gone. And just everything that happened during the Biden administration, where we were told, hey, everything takes a back seat. Everything is, slow down. So
you were told everything takes a back seat, on your team specifically?
Everything slowed down. Yes. Everything. So when I was on Joint Task Force Vulcan, during the Trump administration, we were go, 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 go. During the Biden administration, everything was like, wow, let's think about it. Let's talk about it. It was a definite different direction that the Biden administration wanted to take on Hispanic organized crime. So we were definitely slowed down. Nobody ordered me, hey, you need to stop doing an investigation. Nobody ever ordered me that. But there wasn't a support from Department of Justice.
Were you able to do any cases, like you said, you were covering mostly the gangs, like that was the team you were on, but did you have any cases before you left run into where you're working on the cartels as well? Touching them at all?
Not directly. I mean, we knew that there was I know that there's other case agents who are working this, that there were clear cartel connections, but none of my cases ever crossed, had a clear cross with any cartel. But we knew that there was cooperation.
Yeah, because obviously the cartels also had the whole system at the border where they're coyotes bringing people across. Bet their coyotes were also probably bringing your guys across too.
And from what I understand is you don't bring product, whether it be human, guns, drugs, across a territory, the Sinaloa, CJNG.
That's right.
Without paying homage and paying dues to the cartel. They'll take you out.
Yeah.
So they were working. They were literally, okay. So MS-13, the rank structure that MS-13 had changed in 2015. So the program managers and the MS-13 leadership were always based in El Salvador. And a lot of the program managers also moved to the United States in pre-2015. So you'd have a lot of leadership here in the United States. They were getting so much heat that they decided to move the middle management to Mexico. So there was a large MS-13 presence in Mexico.
And the cartels invited that. They were okay with that.
Correct. They were. It was in cooperation with the cartels. So you'd see
they're going to do stuff for them.
They do the dirty work, exactly. So
Yeah.
MS-13 would do the dirty work, and then cartels were just benefiting from it.
To the middle management and the stuff like that, I would imagine it's more the stereotypical things I'm thinking of, the guys with tats all over their face and that kind of thing. But like the program managers, are these the kind of guys you would never guess are in MS-13? Maybe they roll around with a suit and have an office somewhere.
Not that I encountered.
So they were all
like your traditional, your traditional tattooed members up. So those are those were the middle management. So what you see online, you Google search it and you see all tats and everything like that. So
Did you ever bump into stuff where you realized there were intelligence operations occurring, United States sponsored, in anything you were looking at? No. Okay, so you didn't encounter.
No, I never had a blue on blue situation where I was
blue on blue.
So I never had a situation where I was investigating, all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, agency's involved or something like that. No, I never had that. And that's why I'm like jealous now of all the guys, because now the agency and, National Security Branch, they're involved now.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, because they're a terrorist organization.
Oh, yeah. Well,
because that opens up a whole new set of tools. And
like how they've been involved in other ways.
Yes, you're right. But now it's like, you understand this from the case agent perspective. There's certain tools that I did not have that were not at my disposal.
I know.
Those tools.
I know.
Are now what they do. That's of course, like you said, like you're saying, of course they were involved.
Yeah, I had Matthew Hedger on the podcast. I just recorded with him another time. He was sitting in that seat, and he was a knock for CIA, and he infiltrated the cartels. He was one of their chief. Nice. He was one of their chief money launderers, and like he's sitting there talking about how he would get top 5, top 10 guys at like major international banks to flip and, basically like cover for the cartels and shit. Because his job was to keep, and this is where the moral quandary comes in. And fuck if I can solve all this, but like his job was to, support the operations because it gave him access to do other CIA work that had nothing to do with them. And it gets weird because I would imagine, and it came up with him as well. You run into organizations like FBI and some other law enforcement organizations who are trying to take this stuff down. Yeah. And then they bump into a case and they find out fuck, you guys are in the middle of it.
I never did. I've heard stories that there are there have been situations like that.
Yeah.
But I've never been involved in that. None of my cases had ever. I never ran into another agency.
Do you think the El Mayo case might have had something like that?
Which one?
The El Mayo case.
Oh, listen, everything was crazy about that one.
Yeah.
Everything was absolutely crazy about that one. Absolutely. I think that one is absolutely was who was talking to who and backdoor deals and absolutely. Yeah. But I never ran into anybody who was from another agency. I only ran into HSI, but we typically worked with them. There was always a cooperation with them.
What do you think of that guy Bukele down in El Salvador? Because like he came in, I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, something like that. And one of his big things is like cracking down on MS-13. That said, he's kind of a dictator.
What what did you say earlier? I'm saying a lot of things by not saying things.
Yeah,
just saying. I think that Bukele is clearly, the stats are showing that El Salvador is one of the safest countries, and I'm doing air quotes here.
You're doing air quotes.
Yes, safest countries, and I believe that's true. Again, I'm believing. I'm just looking at statistics and news stories.
So those are lightly held air quotes.
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know. My question is what you just said. He's done sweeping arrests.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a lot of people that are getting swept up here. I can't imagine, and I have nothing to, I never investigated Bukele or the administration in El Salvador. I never did. So always,
Allegedly.
No, I never did. I
believe you.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So
you can tell me. No one's listening.
I just think that it'd be very surprising. In previous El Salvadorian administrations, we knew that they were working with MS-13.
Mm-hmm.
They were working with MS-13.
I don't think this guy. I'll give him that. It doesn't look like he is.
I agree. I don't think he is. I don't think he's working with MS-13. But something has to have changed, for all of a sudden, for there to go from 100 to 0.
Yeah.
And something has changed right there. Just the sweeping arrests is not going to do it alone. I mean, either that, if that's the truth, that they sweeping arrests, they're scooping up like entire, villages and people and everything. There's got to be innocent people that are.
That's what I'm saying.
There's got to be innocent people that are. So is that worth it?
Yeah.
Is it worth it?
It's a valid question. I mean,
and that's where I'm saying is when I'm saying when I'm putting the air quotes and saying allegedly, that's to me are the innocent people being arrested? Yeah, you're getting the bad elements off.
At what cost?
At what cost?
Yeah, it's like I don't want to sit here and defend like the worst MS-13 guys and the type of shit they do. These are terrible people who should absolutely be behind bars, and no, it shouldn't be a Holiday Inn. But I don't love that CCOT thing because, like you said, there are some people in there who maybe are only lightly affiliated, or some that could even be innocent, and these people are thrown in. They're breaking every Geneva Convention type thing that exists there. And when I'm just saying, I understand when people are very angry at horrible groups like that. I mean, you spent your whole career fighting these guys, and I'm with you. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And it's not our country, but I'm looking at that because, he's marketing. He's a great marketer. He's marketing this shit around 100%. The world. And I'm like, that is not a trend I want to see. Take violent elements in any country off the street, put them in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Not like that.
Yeah. No, I agreed. And it's a dangerous road to go down. And hopefully other countries don't follow that blueprint. But I could see some other countries going, "Ooh, that worked for him. Maybe I could do it here."
That's right.
And hopefully it does, because you're going to have innocent people who are going to get scooped up, and something you were talking about earlier about the conviction rate of innocent people ending up in court. That's and right. Just saying, but how many of those people never even saw a day in court? They're just going, you're going to
well, that's what it is.
Yeah,
he just scoops them up.
Exactly. They're just scooping up and thrown in jail, and they just disappear from the village.
Gone.
And they're gone.
Never
now,
come back.
Yeah, you're taking care of the bad elements, but you're also scooping up some innocent people.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
I don't know.
I'm hearing a lot of things between your words there too, which is interesting. Yeah, there it is again. Okay. I just, like I said,
I hope that there's good solutions and then there's bad solutions. And hopefully we find good solutions, to take care of problems in this country.
Fair enough. Dan, this has been awesome, man. You got some great analysis on a lot of different things. We touched some stuff I didn't think we were even going to touch today, which was really cool.
Cool.
But I'm glad that, it sounds like there's some good trends in some of that department now, where some of these different groups, whether it be the cartels or some of these gangs, are being taken seriously. And hopefully we don't see the proliferation that we seem to see in the last few years around America.
I hope that there needs to be a stronger attention pointed to South America, to everything from Mexico, from the border all the way down to Argentina. We need to turn attention to it, and why we've ignored it. I don't know why. You got the Chinese thing, the Hispanic organized crime. We need to be paying more attention to that, to the south of the border, not just cartels, but it's all of it. It's really it's a danger to this country. It's a national security issue.
Absolutely.
That's right on our doorstep.
Yeah.
And it's Chinese, Hispanic organized crime. It's all of it. It's right here. And, we always, in this country, we have the liberty and the protection of, two big oceans to our left and to our right. Nobody from Europe, this is right here.
Yep.
And no one is paying attention to it. I mean, listen, no, I stand corrected. People are paying attention to it, but people aren't paying the proper attention to it. I mean, there are people that I know are hey, we need to focus on this, but it just seems to be like, let's look at the next TikTok. Let's look at the next Instagram. So,
all right. Well, we're going to have the link to your Substack down below. So if people want to hear analysis like you've heard today from Dan, you can get that on a Substack. So make sure you go sign up over there. But thanks for doing this, man.
I appreciate
it.
No, it's been a blast.
All right, cool. Everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace. Thank you guys for watching the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. They're both a huge, huge help. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below.